All right, I believe that we should be live. Thank you for your patience. We had a little issue getting the presentation to come through, but we got that up now, so we're ready to begin. Today we're going to be looking at some of the sources of the Quran, some of the sources of Muhammad's words it, that he attributes to Allah outside of the Quran. And to be clear, we're not talking about things which are found in the Torah or the Psalms, which Islam claims are equivalent to the Quran, that they are previous revelations of a law that got corrupted, but rather we're talking about things that Jewish people would agree that were written by rabbis as commentary on the scriptures, as speculation about the scriptures, as interpretation or laws relating to scriptures, but not the scriptures themselves, which is, of course, highly problematic that the eternal word of Allah has these writings of Jewish rabbis in it. Before we get into any details, I'm going to start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the technology that allows us to connect with people from all around the world. And we thank you for the opportunity to speak the truth into a Muslim world which has long been cut off from the rest of civilization. We thank you for the power of the internet to reach people who could not otherwise be reached. We ask that anyone watching approach the material with an open mind, whether they are a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, or they have some other belief system, that they look at what we have to say, that they consider the evidence, and they ask themselves what is true, not what they've been taught, but rather what is actually true. If Islam is the truth, we want that to come through today. But if Islam is not the truth, we want that to come through as well. We ask that you be with us today and you guide our discussion. We ask that you prevent us from theological error, and that anything that we say that is true is remembered, but anything that we say that is false is forgotten. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So I have a new guest, sort of. He's been on a couple of my call-in shows. Name is Sasha, also goes by Alexander. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background?
Hello, Thaddeus. Well, my name is Alexander, but usually people call me Sasha. I'm from Montenegro. It's like small country on the Balkan, Mediterranean Sea, ex-Yugoslavia. Well, I'm 41 years old. It's not my main profession. I'm ex-duty active soldier, but it's like a hobby of mine to study about Christianity, Islam, and sources. And with my couple of my friends, we have a small YouTube channel. It is like on English, the way, the true and the light, but it's life, but is on our language is Put Istina Život. And we try to promote some truths and also to show people some of the illusions that Islam have it, but their apologists don't speak about it. Basically, they lie people. That's it.
Excellent. So a link to that channel is in the video description. Definitely encourage you to check that out. Most of the material is in Serbian, I believe, but there are some English videos as well.
We made playlist on English. I will give you later the link so people can connect directly to the English playlist. So
Excellent.
it's easier.
Yeah, I'll get that added to the video description later today.
Thanks.
For For all my guests, the first time they're on the channel, I like to ask this question: why are you a Christian?
Well, because I have some, uh, I had some stuff in my life that led me to the Christ. Basically, I was born in the Orthodox family, but I was not a really believer and didn't so much uh, confess my faith and live by the faith. In one part of my life, I was like gnostic or half gnostic. So, but thanks God, through the time, a lot of signs, a lot of stuff that happened in my life, I find Jesus Christ. So it's
Excellent.
not like I'm born strictly born Orthodox, no, but I become one.
Absolutely. Christianity is a choice.
Yes,
Someone might be born into a Christian family, but they're not truly Christian until they make that choice for themselves.
indeed, indeed.
So, what are we going to be talking about today? I know I gave my introduction, but I'd like to hear your introduction to the subject as well.
Well, we are going to talk about Jewish sources in the Quran and a little bit in the Hadith and Islamic tradition, and that sources are not from, for instance, Moses or even Jesus. A lot of them start much later and find the road to the Quran. Uh, that confirm my opinion that I have that Quran and Islam didn't start in Mecca or Medina, but started pretty much north, somewhere in like Petra and Iraq. Iraq today it's like Persian Empire, Mesopotamia, and take a little bit later some sources from the south, from the Yemen. And after maybe 100 years, Umayyad, and after that Abbasid made Islam that looks like now. And this is one of the reasons that I investigate couple stuff. And one day it hit me, and I want to thanks a lot to the Wahhabi Hanbali apologists, because they one day they was talking about me how Bible is corrupted and gave me same hadiths that said, oh look, it says that was this was in the Tevrat, in the Torah, basically on Arabic, but where is now? And I said, I supposed that are not good stuff that you show me. But one day I figure out that that stuff that they are quoting was not from the Torah, but was from the Talmud. So I figure out for the Jews, they have two Torahs, like oral Torah and written Torah. Written Torah is our Torah in the Bible, but oral Torah is like Mishnah, Talmud, and Midrash, and some other stuff that are definitely unbiblical. So, and for the Jews, that is the same Torah, you know. And I understand it, connected the dots, and said, "Oh my God!" And that is how I find out this kind of stuff. Start to investigate. So, thank you, Wahhabis. You helped me a lot.
You're most welcome. So, Mr. Rambo7, a Muslim in the chat before we started, spent 20, 30 minutes talking about how we had that we were following a different religion than the Jews, and that the Jews wouldn't agree with Christianity, blah blah blah. The second we start, he says, "Bye, I'm leaving now. Take care, people." Very interesting that he doesn't want to hear any of the actual information. He only wants to leave his propaganda. He can't risk seeing any information because that might take him out of Islam, I guess.
Indeed, Tedis. Indeed, when I first time on one my well friend, let's say friend, he invited me to show this kind of stuff. Oh, it was pretty hot atmosphere. One guy leave the show, said very nasty stuff to me, but what can I do? That is the sources. Take it or leave it, people. What can I do?
Indeed. What can you do other than give the information? If the Muslim wants to stick their head in the sand and not pay any attention, I guess there's nothing we can do about it. But for anyone who's interested in the truth, the information is available. So I'm going to go ahead and put your presentation on the screen now. We'll start to take a look at some specific examples. Hold on one second.
Yeah, it's okay.
I put it on the screen, but the green is being blacked out because I had a green screen effect on there previously. So let me get that off. Give me 1 second. Takes the settings a second to change.
It's okay.
All right. Now people will actually be able to see the parts that are in green as well. So we're going to look at some specific examples of these copy and paste, or at least influence, from the Jewish sources to Islam. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and guide us through the first example.
We'll start with the first example, and the example is the probably most obvious one for two reasons. It's not just copy paste, but is also explained the same way in the tafsirs that are Persian. Basically made it. Al-Tabari and basically Al-Bukhari, Muslim Tirmidhi, all of them were Persian. None of them was Arab. And also you will see that story that originated in the Babylonian Talmud and takes source from the 3rd century Halakhat tradition doesn't fit the context of the Torah, and it was later invention. And the original story was from the Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha that said that, for instance, God offered to the Jews, not forcibly, but with free choice, the Torah. Later narrative in Babylonian Talmud start to promote the story that God forced Jews to accept the Torah, and that is not true, and that is not what is written in the Torah. So let's start. You see here, it's Surah 263. It said, and when we took your covenant, O children of Israel, to abide by the Torah, and we raised over you the mountain, saying, take what we have given you with determination, and remember what is in it, that perhaps you may become righteous. So it's obvious that God left the Torah above the Jews to threaten them. Now, if we look at the also Avodah Zarah 2b16, you can also find it in Shabbat 88b, I think, from the Babylonian Talmud. You will see the same story. Holy One forced the mountain like a tube on Israel and said to them, if you accept the Torah, it is better, and if not, there will be your burial. Practically the same stuff is said by Gemara. Gemara is basically commentary how to understand Mishnah. Now we can see datings. Babylonian Talmud was composed throughout the 5th, 6th centuries, but this story generated a little bit earlier. But let's start from the beginning. This is official page, and this is the professor of the Jewish studies. So in several midrash, God lovingly lifted the mountain Sinai over the Israelites to protect them from the danger of the revelation. But one midrash, however, has God threatening to bury the Israelites with the mountain if they don't accept the Torah. The difference is intertext. Now, let's just say that first midrash was basically from the 1st, 2nd century, probably earlier, that said that in the time when Jews accepted the revelation from the God, it was a lot of thunders. So God raised the mountain above them to protect them. And that story, true or not, is in line with the Torah, because in Torah we will see that God don't threaten the Jews to accept the law and the covenant, but offer them on the free basis. When you accept it, then you have blessings and curses if you don't stick to the Torah. But before that, you could take it or leave it. Now, this is the early Tanaic Midrash that go in line with the Torah from Rabbi Ishmael. It's very early, legendary rabbi. He lived basically in the time of the destruction of the first temple and the second temple, and during the time after that. And he said that the Jews were scared of the thunders, lightning, so God left the mountain to protect them. Now, this is the explanation how rabbis understand that, and the reason that rabbis understand this kind of story, because they literally read the Torah. And in Torah, and also in Septuagint, it said that the Jews stood like on the bottom of the mountain, and they understand it that God basically lifted the mountain above them. So this is the positive story that go to line to Torah, but now this is the negative story that take roots from the Halakhat 3rd century Midrash and record the negative and frightening version of this Midrash. It's in Shabbat 88 and Avodah Zarah also 2b 17 that said that God lifted the mountain above Jews to threaten them if they reject the Torah, that he will kill them. Now, if we will saw also in the tafsirs, the same stuff, Tafsir Jalalain. You can read it. Ibn Kathir, even now, that is the stuff that I'm telling you, Thaddeus, about Persian understanding and putting out the Quran from the natural context, because let's say like hadith from Abbas said the mountain is Tur because she's green, get green vegetation. If no vegetation grows on it, it is not called Tur, but on Syriac Tur is the mountain, never mind have it or have not vegetation. So that is also the one of the reason that well, Persians didn't understand the Quran or the Syriac background of the Quran. And the hadith about the tribes, Ibn Abbas said, when the Jews, refused to obey, Allah raised the mountain above their heads so that they would listen. Now, yeah, same story. This is the Tafsir al-Tabari. Yeah?
Yeah, I'll let you finish. I just was agreeing, but I'll let you finish this presentation and then I'll add some of my own commentary.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can go for instance, after every example to make commentaries.
Yep, that would be perfect.
Yeah. So, for instance, this is Al-Tabari Tafsir. It's from the official page of the Kingdom of Jordan, their University of Islam. So none of these tafsirs I didn't take from the Christians' pages. All of them are from the Islamic pages, and official Islamic pages, let's be clear. So in the Tabari, this is the translation, basically the same. He brought the root of the mountain out of the ground, so he raised it above them like a canopy, and Al-Tur in Syriac, the mountain for intimidation or fear. You can read it, all the hadiths. Second narration, Mutada told me, he said, Abu Hudayfa told us, he said, Shibi told us on authority of Ibn Abi Najih, on authority of Mujahid, he said, the mountain was raised above them like a cloud, and it was said to them, you will believe, or it will fall on you. Third narration, you can find it at least 5 or 6 in Tafsir al-Tabari, but they didn't want to cut them all. It said the same stuff. The mountain was raised over the children of the Israel, and he said, you will believe in it, or it will fall upon you. So, what can you say, people? The same story, copy paste. Even
Indeed.
the understanding
Very,
of the story is copy paste.
yeah, very interesting. So you have something that's found in the actual Torah, in the written text of the Jewish scriptures. And then you kind of have this imaginative interpretation of the rabbis, where they take these words and they kind of imagine this very dramatic event where the mountain is literally being picked up by God. The text doesn't say that, of course, but the rabbis kind of imagine it, and
The
the
story
the
was
Muslims going to
generated
tell.
after the Christ.
Right, right, yes, much long after the text is written, rabbis speculating on kind of this hidden meaning of the text, and the Muslims are going to want to tell us that the original text is corrupted, that maybe if they're very creative, they'll say that these rabbis still had access to the original text or something. But it's very easy to see how the interpretation can come out of the text. It's quite difficult to see how the what the rabbis are saying could have been the original text and then it got corrupted, because why would this dramatic event of a mountain being picked up and either used as a threat or as a source of protection be changed to just the simple statement, like this whole long interesting story is changed to the simple statement about the people being at the base of the mountain. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the possible creative excuse of the Muslims. So what we actually see is that the author of the Quran was familiar with these Jewish stories, was familiar with what the rabbis were saying, didn't know that that wasn't actually their scripture. If you look at the Quran over and over again, it says it's confirming the Torah, confirming the Torah, confirming the Torah. It never says anything about correcting the Torah or restoring the corrupted Torah or anything along those lines. The author of the text thought he was repeating things that are found in the Torah. Problem is, they're not. They're found in and Jewish rabbis' speculation, their interpretation, however you want to put it, but not in the text itself.
And most important stuff is because in the Muslim theology, they said between the Jesus and Muhammad, there were no new revelation, but this story originated after Christ, probably 3rd century, maybe 2nd, but not 1st century. And so tell me how the story that originated after Christ went to the Quran, and by your logic, how is from the God. And also, the same rabbis use the same text of the Torah that composed the Babylonian Talmud, like the rabbis that composed the Jerusalem Talmud. So it's basic same story, probably letter per letter, and rabbis in the time of Christ, probably a little bit earlier, have one story that go in line with the Torah. Never mind, is it like fiction or not, but have a logic with the basics of logic of Torah. But second story that originated from the 3rd century, let's say maybe 2nd, but probably 3rd century, go against the same text of the Torah that both rabbis use from Jerusalem and from the Babylonian. So also, you see that my theory, it's not just my theory, a lot of people now discover that Islam originated basically north, not from Mecca, but from Iraq, and Babylon was in Iraq.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting that apparently there were prophets after Jesus who just happened to be rabbis writing the
Yeah,
Talmud. As you point out, contradicting one another, different speculations about the same verses and, very different contradictory points of view. And yet somehow all of this just makes it into
Yeah.
Allah's eternal word. It was written before the
And the
foundation
wrong
of the
one
earth.
went to the wrote to the Quran. The wrong one. It was
Right.
not from the Rabbi Ishmael, but was from the Babylonian Talmud from Iraq. Oh my God.
So a couple
No,
comments/questions from the audience. Question for you. By Persian, do you mean Shiite?
no, I don't mean Shiite. I mean Persians. Persians. Abu Dawud, Bukhari, Muslim. Uh, I think Ibn Majah maybe. The teacher of the Bukhari, of the Abu Dawud, all of them, Al-Tabari, all of them were Persians from Persia. They were not Arabs, and they didn't understand even the Syriac, the Syriac background of the Arab language, and didn't understand even the Arab language properly. Yes, they were probably excellent speakers of the Arab language, but did not understand the hidden meanings, the slangs, the traditional cultural use of the Arabic language from the tribes. So, for instance, like I understand what is the meaning. Don't pull my boot on English, but it's not literal. It's metaphorical. Basically, somebody was telling me, "Don't joke with me," and if I don't understand that context, I could translate it totally wrong, right?
Exactly. Phil pointed out that Tur means mountain in Syriac, confirming what you were saying there, that
Yeah,
they they're drawing from the Syriac text, but they weren't necessarily understanding it correctly. Like you just said, that they had some knowledge of it, but they weren't necessarily have all the cultural knowledge, and they didn't necessarily understand all the idioms. So they end up making some really embarrassing mistakes in Allah's eternal word.
yeah, because most of these hadiths are fabrications, and even the most authentic Sahih hadiths, most of them are fabrications or even interpolations or misunderstood. For instance, Muhammad was also title for the Jesus before Islam. So uh, it's pretty messed up. But what is 100% sure, that real history was not even close to the Islamic narrative. What was the real history? It's up to us still to discover. We did not connect all the dots, and by we I don't mean by myself, but the archaeologists and scientists that are now examine all the stuff. But who knows, for maybe 20 or 30 years, it will be common stuff to understand what approximately happened, and that will be much different from the standard Islamic narrative.
Definitely. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the tafsirs kind of give away that the early Muslims kind of knew what was going on, that they often take in these interpretations that aren't necessarily obvious in the Quran. Um, in this case, perhaps, it's fairly straightforward from the Quran, but often they understand the context the Quran is written in, and they add these details from the Jewish sources in their interpretation of the Quran because they know the stories that it's based on, but don't yet know that those stories aren't really part of the Torah or anything along those lines. They haven't yet come into contact with widespread polemics saying that, your text disagrees with ours. They've still kind of thought that it was the same text. They have the same cultural background as the author of the text. And so they're adding additional details from the stories that are found in the Jewish writings or other writings, depending on what we're looking at. And they're saying that this is what the Quran means. They seem to know what Allah actually meant because they know the story that
From the
the
Jewish sources.
rabbis were saying.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're talking about descriptions, For the people that think that Mecca didn't exist, was just a fairy tale from the Christian apologist, there are no historical proof of Mecca, not even mentioned once before 8th century, and didn't exist like small village even before 4th century. And Romans, for instance, 26 years before Christ, made expedition that go all the way through Hijaz to the Yemen. They find Yemen, they find everything. They also, as I understand, make small port close to today's Jeddah, but there were no signs of Mecca. And if Islamic narrative is true, in that case, all people will know where is Mecca because Arabs lived north on the borders of the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, and also on the south on the borders of Ethiopian Empire. And if Mecca was really their main center of pilgrimage, uh, Romans would know, Persians would know, because they know very well, for instance, for Yatrib or Medina or for Petra or for that kind of Arabs that live there, because they were allies. A lot of tribes from the Arabs was allies to the Persians and others allies to the Romans, but nobody didn't mention Mecca. Very strange. Also, the Alexander Macedonicus, made expedition around the Arabian Peninsula to find some port. For he was trying to make some invasion, I think, on Egypt or somewhere in Africa, and he did not find nothing on the Arabian shore after Yemen. No Jeddah. And Islamic narrative said that Jeddah was there like a port because in Jeddah the ships put cargo, and cargo go to Mecca, and through Mecca all the way to the Persia, Arabia, and etc. But no port. On the other side, African Horn was ports, but on the Arabian part, no. And inscriptions, when you look rock inscriptions, if you getting closer to Petra on the north, you will find more and more and more religious inscriptions. Also, if you go to the south, closest to Yemen, because in Petra was some kind of Kaaba, and also in Yemen was some kind of Kaaba, you will find also more and more religious inscriptions. But between Yemen and Petra, you will find love inscriptions. And because there were no Mecca and there were no Kaaba in Mecca, and when you are traveling between two places very distant, you will write love poetry. They didn't have internet or books. They wrote on the stones. But when you are coming close to some place that you do pilgrimage, it's logical that you will write some prayers or something on the stones. So one more reason to see there was no Mecca in that time, and the Islam begin basically from the north, take something from the Yemen from the south, and finally was finished with the Umayyads and Abbasids, and that was like from the beginning of Islam and the finishing of Islam was two separate worlds, basically.
Yeah, Mel said something similar, that no map existed, or exists really, he should say,
Yeah,
from the 7th century showing Mecca, or prior. You know, we can add or prior. And this is very odd because there's plenty of maps from that time period. And Mecca, according to the Islamic tradition, was a very important city. It was a
should be
center of
famous, should be very
pilgrimage.
famous.
Yeah, right. Very famous, had a center of religious program, major trade outpost, all kinds of trade going through there. And none of the evidence seems to support that. Very, very strange. Just a quick note from Simple Jack that you can minimize the size of the thumbnails on the left-hand side of the screen by dragging over the bar. And you can also minimize the top menu so that there'd be a little bit more space for your actual text if you like.
Let's not do experiment now.
Okay.
I will,
No,
I
no
will
worries.
try
No worries.
next time because it's first time that I share the screen. Basically, I used to share the presentation. So sorry, people, but I think it's
Yeah, I think it's fine.
readable.
It would only be a small difference anyway.
Okay.
So question from Rockstar, do you know anything about Jabal al-Lawz being Mount Sinai, and do you have any info on that?
No, no, I don't have it. You should ask Mel. And also, he have very good serial on the his channel. Well, I learned from him couple stuff. Like for instance, the Quran. When Quran are telling us that, you Christians put Jesus and Mary like a gods. It's basically all Syriac tradition. It's not. Uh, it's, his mother basically. He says Quran, but in Syriac tradition, Holy Ghost was called also the mother, like Jesus' mother, and it was like mocking to the Christians because probably the writers of the Quran were not Trinitarians, or were some kind of the Messianic Jews, or basically take some critique and put it. And but after the well, after the Persians came, they didn't understand it and said that we Christians have Mary in the Trinity. Pretty.
I definitely recommend that channel, Islamic Origins, if you haven't
Yeah.
seen it before. Definitely check that out. And I was able to make things a little bit bigger on my end, so I hope that uh, makes it a little easier for people to read. Would you like to go into our next example?
Yeah, of course. This is the second example. It's from the Talmud Shabbat 88b6, also from Al-Tabari for the same Surah 263, but also from the Surah 255:66. So we will see, for instance, first the Quran. And recall were you, O Moses, when we will never believe you until we see Allah outright. So the thunderbolt took you while you were looking on. Then we revived you after you're dead, that perhaps you would be grateful. So, what's the details now? Let's look in the Shabbat 88b 6. We sent down a dew that was going to bring the dead back to life, and he brought them back to life, as it is said, rain of alms, etc. Now, look at this in the yellow. And since their souls left their bodies from the first utterance, how did they receive the second utterance? Rather, God rained the dew upon them that in the future will receive the dead, and he revived them as is stated. So basically, they was during the accepting the revelation, their souls leave their bodies, and after that, God bring them back to life. Similar story from the Quran, not copy paste, but very similar. Now you see explanation also from the Tafsir al-Tabari from Surah 263. Then came the wrath of God, and the thunderbolt struck them, so they all died. He said, then God revived them after they dead. And Moses said to them, take the book of God. And they said, no. After that, he said, why not? And God lifted the mountain above them and forced them to accept the Torah. So also the basically same story, but Persian interpretation was a little bit different, but basically copy-paste story that was killed and resurrected by the God in the Quran and in the Talmud.
Yeah, here
Pretty,
we kind of see a good example of what I was talking about, where the Quran just has this kind of vague allusion to the story, and the tafsir reveals that the early Muslims knew the background story. They knew what the rabbis were talking about, because the Quran just says, you know, that the people were struck with thunder, or you know, whatever the exact wording was, and then the tafsir supplies the explanation. It's not 100% identical to what the rabbi was saying, you know, reflecting a different tradition, but in the same general family of tradition, the same general uh, ideas are shared between the background that Al-Tabri is familiar with, and the background the Jewish rabbi is writing from. And then the Quran just makes a vague allusion to this background, indicating that it's dependent on these sources, that it's dependent on, you know, maybe not the exact written text of the rabbi, to be clear, but the social context where these stories are
Yeah,
being shared, which incidentally do not come from the Bible.
yeah. It's basically like telling the story to the people that already knew it. So you don't need to quote the story. Just give them couple elements, like from the fairy tales. When you talk about some events from the fairy tale to the children know the fairy tale. You just mention a couple words or sentences, and they will know about the story and what the story is about. So it's simple like that in the Quran and Talmud. You will see also in some other sources that, for instance, there are no sense, no clue that Quran will talk to the polytheist, because you cannot talk polytheist in the short sentences or short notes about some Jewish and Christian legends, because they will not knew it very well. So you need to explain them. But a lot of verse in the Quran was basically like Quran talking to the Jews or some heretical Christians, because they know the stories, and there are no stories for the pagans, but for the some kind of monotheists that have some heretical, let's say, understandings. And sorry, one second for the charger. Sorry. And that is the reason, that is the reason for that kind of stuff. So it's nice to see it. I don't know why scientists didn't do this before, because I'm not like discovering something new. All this stuff was very known to the scientists, and for the archaeologists, for the linguists, historians, but just in the era of fast internet, we get familiar with them, basically.
Yeah, a couple comments there. First, on your last point, when you look actually at the late 19th century, early 20th century, you see some developments along these lines. Some people writing about the origins of Islam, but then it just completely disappears. It drops from the radar, and we've had to rediscover it, so to speak, in modern times. You know, the reason why people became disinterested in the origins of Islam, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's just because there weren't any Muslims around at that time, where most of the academics were living, or there was pressure. There certainly could have been social pressure, or from coming from the Muslims to stop doing this, because, you know, we definitely get that today, so that could have happened in the past. But whatever the cause, you're right, this information is, it's not like someone just uncovered this, you know, they dug up an old manuscript and we just now figured this out. The information has been available, but there hasn't been a lot of interest in looking into this, which is sad, that the academics have just been willing to take the standard Islamic narrative for granted, while massively scrutinizing the Christian faith, while massively a, uh, coming up with all these theories about Christianity developing much later than the time of Jesus and whatnot. Theories which have now been disproven, theories that we now have solid evidence against, but they weren't even willing to consider that possibility when it comes to Islam.
Yeah,
Going back a bit, go ahead.
because well, first of all, it was pressure from the fear of some Muslim fanatic. First reason. Second reason, it was pressure because of the politicians and government. They didn't want to have some angry Muslims. And also it was financial pressure on the universities, because a lot of universities are financed by the Arab countries, and that people need to, let's say, take care for their jobs. So that is the reason, that is the reason. As I know, one teacher was like fired because she showed the pictures of Muhammad, but she
Mm-hmm.
saw it from the Islamic sources, like pictures from life of Muhammad was from some mosque or palace from the, I suppose, 12th or 13th century. Now, what is the problem if your ruler had that pictures? Why is the problem to show it somewhere? I don't understand, but that's it. What can I say?
Indeed, that not only is Islam privileged, but a particular interpretation of Islam, which is basically a very recent development, maybe 100, 200-year-old movement at the most, this Wahhabism, where, it's this very strict literalist interpretation. We think of that as Islam because this group is very loud, very vocal, very much in control of the money, because that comes from Saudi Arabia. But this doesn't represent Islam today. That the majority of Muslims around the world have different beliefs. They have synchronistic type beliefs where they mixed Islam with elements of the pre-Islamic culture, and they don't follow things like this. Shias don't believe that making images of Muhammad is forbidden. The image that you're referring to was from a Shia source, but somehow that Islam doesn't count, and that branch of Islam doesn't count anymore. So it's really quite sad that academics who are supposedly all about the truth and freedom to say what is true, no matter whether it offends someone or not, they are bowing to the pressure from a select group of Muslims who have all the money, as you pointed out. That's
Yeah.
probably a big part
It's
of it.
not just Shia source. Also Turks have that kind of stuff. This they are Hanafi mezhab, so it's not just Shia. And basically, when one of these Wahhabis take the power in Arabia, and they start to promote some kind of that. Well, there's your Orthodox, but basically it's unorthodox movement of Islam.
Right.
So let's start with the third example. Third example is Surah 6, 101, and Kohelet Rabach 4:8. Now I put the word date in here. I will explain later why. So let's see what the famous ayah from Surah 6 said. He is originator of the heavens and the earth. How could he have a son when he does not have a companion? And he created all things, and he is of all things knowing. Now, probably most of you heard for this kind of ayah. But let's look something else. Kohelet Rabak 4:8. There is one and not another. He also has no son or brother. He also has no son or brother. If he has no brother, from where would he have a son? Now it's familiar, pretty familiar, but not the same. But let's look a little bit what for instance, Alan F. Segal said about that. The traditional understanding is that this letter is not just to be constructed as brother, or rather as consort. the meaning of the praise would be that God could not possibly have a son because he has no consort. This interpretation satisfies the sense of the passage. Significantly, the phrase used to describe the second power in heaven, partner, which we have seen was the term for the heretic secular figure present on the creation in Adam's speculation. And this is the book, Two Powers in Heaven by Alice Segal. Takes flow from the channel of Islam Critique. I watched this example long times ago. Now, why I'm telling you dating? Kohelet Rabbah was written 6th to 8th centuries. Manuscripts are found from, I think, 9th centuries. But work mostly present material for early sources, including Bereshit Rabbah, it's 4th to 5th centuries, Peshikta, Davkahana, Ekach Rabbah, Vaikir Rabbah, etc. Most of these sources was taken from the earlier sources before Islam. And now for one story about golden calf in Kohelet Rabbah was like dispute among the scholars. Does Islam take it from the Kohelet Rabbah or Kohelet Rabbah take it from the Islam? But no dispute that I found about this example. Because of that, I did not bring the example of the golden calf, because somebody could say that Jews take from Muslims. But for this example that I brought you, I didn't find no dispute between the scientists. So this story probably was generated by the rabbis, because they rejected that God have a son, and they basically rejected their own believing story from the 1st and 2nd century. And after that, they declare it like a heretic story. But that story was so strong in the time of Jesus and after Jesus. And material evidences, it's probably much, much older, but material evidences, you can trace it about 200 years before Christ, that many rabbis rejected decision of Jewish Sanhedrin and continue to believe that God have a son. So that was originated by the Jews. And when the Jesus telling you in the Gospels that he is son of God and unique son of God, descend from the heaven, he was pretty clear that he's that kind of son of God, and not son of God like Israel, my son of that God said, or something like that, but a real son of God, like heavenly being, not son like human can have sons, but basically one of the God's persons, one of the God's powers, because in the early stages, Jews and at least some of them, their biggest, let's say, ways, sources believed that God is multi-personal, so one, but in many persons. And this is the story from them, because after 2nd century, they decided that their, let's say, standard Orthodox believing that God have a son is not relevant anymore, and it's heresy. Oh, what can we say?
Excellent. So I have first of all, a super chat from Islam Mentera Overdad. Just says thank you. So thank you for that donation. If you speak Spanish, be sure to check out Ruth's channel, with the name you see up on the screen there. She is translating apologetics videos into Spanish. Very important work, since so much of the world's population speaks Spanish. So if you happen to speak Spanish, I don't, but if you happen to, check that channel out.
Io parlavo un po' italiano, però io non parlare spagnolo. Just Italian, little bit Italian.
Yeah. To be clear, I was speaking to the audience, not necessarily to you specifically, but we also have a comment here from Nicholas, which for some reason doesn't want to come up on the screen, but he says, named the ear because Muhammad listened and incorporated all belief systems which were anti-Christian, which I think is a good point to remember because Muslims will tell us sometimes in response to something like this, if Muhammad was really copying other beliefs, surely people would have been accusing him of doing that or complaining about him doing
It
that.
was Sahih Hadith that said it is just the stories of the ancients. Yeah. Oh my God. But you see, that is the let's say Persian propaganda, because Quran didn't start like that, and as I believe by the evidences that I saw, Muhammad was historical figure, but not like prophet. And as I understand, he was some kind of the ruler. He did not even said for himself that he's a prophet, and he takes some big like coalition of the Jews and Arabs, and to basically fought against the Byzantines and Persians, and he gave the scholars to made Quran like their book. But after Umayyads want to make their own religion, their own nationality, Arab nationality, language, and everything, they invented some stories about Muhammad. That story narrative start with them, and finally it was like canonized by the Abbasid, because Abbasids claim that they are descendants of the Muhammad. So they have a very big interest if they lift Muhammad to the status of the biggest prophet in the history, and they are descendants from him. They could easily rule by the big emperor that they have, and they did it for a couple hundred years after Seljuks with them.
Definitely. Getting back to this example that we're looking at here, it's very interesting that this Jewish source has basically the same idea. In their case, a polemic against the uh, pre-Christian Jewish belief that uh, God is multi-personal. Whether it's directed at Jews that continue to believe that, or whether it's directed at Christians, either way, it's against that belief system. Um, and they're using the same argument that the Quran uses, that if God doesn't have a partner, how can he have a son? And you talked a little bit about the dating issue, and in addition to what you said, is kind of an irrelevant question. People think that it's super important which text was written first, but being written first or second doesn't mean that one text copied from the other. Rather, the situation is often that both texts are drawing from the same cultural background. So if they're, in this case, let's say they're written at roughly the same time. Well, which is more probable? That a Jewish rabbi was looking to the Quran to get information, or that the Quran and this Jewish rabbi are both drawing from the same cultural background, where this is an argument being made in their society?
Yeah, basically it's more logical that they take from the Jews, because in that like ally tribes was a lot of Jews and some heretical Arabic Christians. So it's more logical that that sources was from the Jews, and especially if you know that that polemic against that believing standard Jewish believing in the first and second century, and at least 2 centuries before Christ, was basically challenging the Talmud from the second century, and after that was proclaimed heresy. And as I thought, a lot of rabbis refused, because that was very strong belief in the Jewish nation. So a lot of rabbis refused the decision of the Sanhedrin, and Sanhedrin was the higher religious court of the Jews. So that just showed how that stuff was, that belief was very, very often and very strong in the Jewish community. And it is not that Christian scientists find it, but Moshe Idel, who is a Jew and who is, I think, dean on the Israeli university and very famous scholar. So it's pretty strong evidence for that.
Yeah, definitely. The idea that Jews would take this argument from Muslims doesn't seem plausible. They would have had to have been making arguments against Christianity for hundreds of years before Muhammad came. Why would they just suddenly borrow this argument from Muslims? And
Indeed.
then the other possibility is, that this is just a good argument, so they independently came up with it. Problem with that is not a good argument at all. I mean, the all-powerful
Yeah.
God of the universe can, not that Christians believe that Jesus is created, but if he wanted to create a son, as the polemic assumes, then he
Listen,
could just
Mary,
do that.
Mary could have a son without husband, but God cannot have a son without wife.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Crazy, crazy. So maybe we should go with another
Yep.
example.
Yep.
God is praying. So you know about Sahih Hadith that said that the God's throne, the book that God wrote, was written that God said, "Let my mercy prevail of my anger." And some hadith it said that God is praying now, also in the Sirah of Muhammad. But after that, I think Wahhabis, Albani said no, it's all like Mavdu hadiths, and probably not. So let's look. This is authentic hadith, Sahih, Qudsi. So it said that God, when God decreed the creation, he pledged himself by writing his book, which is laid down with him, "My mercy prevails over my wrath." So interesting. Also, you can see here, also Sahih, that Muhammad said, "May Allah bless him and grant him peace. If anyone says the prayer of me once, Allah prays on him 10 times and removes 10 errors from him." Now, Islamic apologists would say Allah give 10 blessings because I think it's very similar or the same word in Arabic. But whatever is of that two stuff, it's pretty similar to this. Barakut 7a, 1, paragraph 1, from Rabbi Yosef Chalafta. It's like early 2nd century. So along the same lines, Rabbi Yochanan said, "In the name of Rabbi Yosef, from where is derived the Holy One, blessed be he, praise." And now their explanation, as it stated, "I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in the house of my prayer." The verse does not say the house of their prayer, but rather the house of my prayer. From here we see that the Holy One, blessed be he, prays. The Gemara asks, what does God pray? But Rad Zutra, Bartovia said that Rav said him, God said, "May it be my will that my mercy will overcome my anger." And now this is the just beginning and short, let's say short, and after this it's like continuation of that prayer. We also can see this from famous Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, also 2nd century. He said when he was on Yom Kippur, he entered the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, to offer incense. In a vision, he saw a Katriya, the Lord of hosts, one of the names of God expressing his ultimate authority, sitting upon a high exalted throne. And he said to me, "Ishmael, my son, bless me." I said to him the prayer that God prays, "May it be your will that your mercy overcome your anger." So interesting very interesting, especially in the vision. We cannot, well, believe in the rabbi's vision from the 2nd century, and somebody will tell us, but the temple was destroyed in the 70 AD. So yes, but after that, on some short occasion in the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews also start to do some sacrifices. And this story could be also maybe fabricated by the Jews, because it said that Rabbi Ishmael was in the sanctum of Holy of Holies, but I think his father was a high priest, but not him, as I understand from the Jewish history. So never mind if this story is true or not, it's basically cannot be accepted by the rules of the Christianity or the rules of Islam, because it's happened after the descendant of Christ to the heaven. So after Christ and before Muhammad, there are no new revelation. So it's very suspicious that this rabbi had this vision, and they said about the prayer to basically that God is praying, and similar stuff was found in the Hadith. But if you ask our Muslim friends, they will say no, it was revealed to the Muhammad, And what can we say? Also in the Sirah of Muhammad, you will find the Hadith that later was proclaimed, probably, I don't know, I supposed couple of 100 years after that, that was said it was like false Hadith, that Moses was on the heaven, and the angel told him that God is praying the same prayer, basically first line of this prayer, let my mercy prevail my anger. So it's very strange indeed.
Yeah, a couple points. First, on the saying as it relates to Islam, you point out that it's a Sahih Hadith, but actually, not only is it a Sahih Hadith, it's well known in the
Qudsi,
Islamic world.
Qudsi, yeah.
Yeah, this is something that Muslims will say about their God. They'll use this phrase, not necessarily realizing it comes from a Hadith and not the Quran itself. And they'll say that it's something that Allah said, and for good reason. In the Hadith, it is found in various sources. You just put one of them up, but in some versions of it, it specifically says that this is written in Allah's book or written on His tablet, that this is part of His word, and it's not found in the Quran. It's only found in the Talmud. Very
And idea,
interesting.
yeah, an idea about written stuff on the Allah's throne. Jews have even beliefs that God has his own tefillin. You know what is tefillin? It's like that cube that the Jews put on the front head when they are praying. It was custom from the Torah, but in their tradition they also said that God have his own tefillin, and it's a little bit similar. That is written on the tablet, not on some, I don't know, cube on God's head, but on some tablet. But very similar idea.
Definitely. They've kind of fold up scriptures and wear them as decoration to remind themselves of those words. I think that you have to memorize the passage in question before you're allowed to do that, or something along those lines. I don't know the exact rabbinic tradition, but I know what you're referring to for sure. Paradigm asked, could it be that Muhammad captured a rabbi and a priest and forced them to write the Quran? And since they knew they would be killed, they deliberately wrote self-debunking nonsense.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think it was probably the leader of the Jews, and Muhammad is the title. So a lot of stuff that was basically in that community for the cheeses are probably taken the hadith and put like it was for the Muhammad. So it's you will find a lot of story that came from India or China, because it was in hadiths. Most of hadiths was compiled and written in the Baghdad. So like the men have in one hadith from Bukhari 360, another 365 bones, and the same story you could find it in that Chinese and Indian books, you know. And it's not real scientific stuff. It was scientific for them, but not for us today, because we can see that there is no proof in that kind of stuff. Also, you can find some Sahih Hadith that said that there are big roaster, roaster chicken, and with the legs on the earth, and his head was like below the God's throne. He's talking with the God, and that is Sahih Hadith. Even one Islamic, let's say, scholar from the 20th century said it's Sahih Hadith. So just to point out what kind of nonsense is Hadith science.
Yeah, I would agree with you that there's no reason to propose something like this commenter proposed, that Muhammad or whoever actually wrote the Quran is just drawing from the cultural background, drawing from these stories that are well known, and people are recognizing that and accusing him of doing exactly that, of repeating the tales of the ancient
Ancients, yeah.
and passing it off as his revelation. Daniel Iqbal, who I'm guessing might be a Muslim, says, what are we talking about now, guys? So you just came in. We're talking about how the Quran, the supposed eternal word of Allah, borrows from the writings of Jewish rabbis. I hope you stay and pay attention. Megadala, a presumed Muslim, said, facts show that Quran is perfect, but not your Torah. Torah is inconsistent and contradictory. Well, I don't know if you're still here, Megadala, but one, we're not talking about the Torah. And two, the facts do not in any way support your beliefs that you just called facts.
And your hadith from Abu Dawood, Muhammad take the Torah and put it on the table and put head on the Torah. As I remember something similar. I said, I believe in you, and that basically the God that sent you. And by the Torah, he judged between the Jews, also from the hadiths. But it's really different story, and we cannot let's say rely a lot on the hadiths. Basically, hadiths should be for us like second or third grade sources if we really want to investigate what Islam is telling us, basically, and how was begotten in the beginning.
Yeah, and I did want to make a comment on the text that we just looked at as well. I talked about the Hadith side of it, the Muslim side of it. I wanted to talk about the Jewish side of it as well. You probably know this, Alexander, but the audience may not, that this passage in the Jewish writing is connected to Merkabah mysticism, to these attempts to ascend into God's throne room and discover the secret knowledge that only a mystic has access to it, which is very interesting because we see a lot of things in Islam that are connected to Merkabah mysticism. Islam Critique talks about that fairly often.
Great channel.
So I would definitely, if people are interested in that, it's not directly relevant to the point being made here, but it's a very interesting additional observation about this text.
And just to point out, that is not the real and only one sources for Quran, Jewish writings. That is just one of the sources. Quran also take a lot of the Mandel Sabians. It's on the north, not Sabians on the south, from Ginza Rabbah. It was like some Jewish sect, heretical sect, that wrote Giza Rabbah. In Giza Rabbah, you will find a lot of 99 Allah's names, and also you will find the words Tawhid, unification, but you will not find it in Quran. You will find Tawhid in the Ethiopic church that predates Quran, and in the Giza Rabbah, it was like a compound. Some scientists said about second, and the others said about fourth, fifth century, but predate at least for 200 years Islam. And even in Giza Rabbah, you have angels from the light and angels from the fire, like jinns in Islam, and angels from the fire was guardian on the earth and the entrance of the paradise. It's, I think, even in Islamic some sources you will find that jinns, or at least some of the jinns, was like guardians on the earth to enter to the paradise or something like that. So now, if heretical Jewish sect that did not even accept the standard Jewish belief, that believes that did not even accept the Christ, and I think they worship the stars also. That there was like Jewish agnostics or something. So if they inspired Quran, well, that cannot be from the God people.
Definitely. If you want to go ahead and go on to the next example, let's keep this moving along. And this one, I think people will really enjoy.
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, you know, all for the famous Surah 65:4, that is basics in Sharia for the divorce, and also that is basic in the Sharia to allow severe pedophilia, sexual acts with little prepubescent girls. This is that Surah. And now we'll see what was origination of that Surah, and that somebody in some point of the time did not understand or intentionally misrepresent the meaning of the surah and make the road in the Sharia that allows severe pedophilia. And yes, I can prove it with original Islamic books like Hidayah, Reliance of the Traveler, and original and most famous and official Islamic pages that confirm my story, like QA Islam, Ask Hanafi, Ask Shafi, name it. So this is the Surah 65:4, and said Sahih International, just for the Muslims that they will say that I took some, I don't know, false translation. This is most famous and most accurate for the Muslim translation, Sahih International. So it's basically said here that period of waiting when somebody had sexual intercourse with his wife and want to divorce her, she must wait 3 months before divorce, because if she leave husband before that, she could be pregnant, and if she remarry, she could born child to another man. So you will see this here. And also for those who have not menstruated. So basically, if you sleep with those who have not menstruated, they also need to wait 3 months, even they cannot stay pregnant. Now, if you look just Quran, well, you cannot say with a certainty that this ayah talk about that. But unfortunately, the tafsirs and Sahih Hadiths that Persians made confirm that. Now let's see the origination of this story. You will see Mishnah Yavamot 4:10. So now basically you have 3 options in the Mishnah. First opinion is that all girls should wait. Never mind betrothal, married and husband didn't sleep with them, married and husband slept with them. All girls should wait 3 months before remarry if they are divorced. And that is one of the 3 opinions. And that opinion probably was copied and put it in the Quran, but because Quran was forcibly taken from some historical narrative natural environment, put forcibly with the hadiths on the another that Quran doesn't belong, so they make false interpretation. And you will see here, Mishnah Yamot 4:10, it said, Rabbi Yehuda says, the married will be betrothed and the bridegrooms will marry except for the brides in Judea. Because his heart is hard to her, Rabbi Yosef says, all women should be betrothed except for the widow from the face of adultery. Now it's 2nd century, and looks this. They have waited 3 months since their previous marriages ended. This waiting period is necessary so that should a woman give birth shortly after remarrying, it will be obvious that who the father of the child is. This applies both to virgin and non-virgin, both to divorce and widows, and both to women who were married to their previous husband and women who were only betrothed. So in even that woman that only betrothed. That is one of 3 opinions. Second two said that betrothed woman should not wait, but this opinion said that even betrothed woman should wait. Now, this is the same stuff, just a little bit bigger. Now we can talk what is the reason. In Jewish society, you have 2 weddings, and crazy Persians did not understand that. First wedding is practically betrothal, so you are not married with that girl. They make like small wedding, and you make betrothal. So her family and your family make arrangement that girl, when she will grow up, she will be your wife. And when that girl reach puberty and had at least on the Jewish society 12 years and 1 day and reach puberty, that was like a minimum, your family came to her family and you came with them, and now that girl needs to say, I want to marry him. And if she said, I want to marry him, that your and her family make a big wedding, and that was a real wedding. And it was like when all will be finished, because this was some kind of the diplomacy process, about that girl will have about 13 years, basically. And you can marry her and take her to your house, and after that consummate the marriage. So these Persians did not understand it, and I think they understand that both marriages are one marriage, and because of that they put in the Sharia that God allowed sex with little prepubescent girls. Now, of course, some of the, let's say, our Muslim friends or some anti-Semites will say, but we know that Sharia, that Jews allow it. No, they don't. You see, for instance, here, it's Yavamot 61:13, and said that what is the reason for the halakha that a priest may not marry a sexually undeveloped woman? Now they are telling the reason, and after that, they are asked, why does the Mishnah specify that a priest may not marry a sexually undeveloped woman? But this Rav Huna said to them, the halakha does in fact apply even to the Israelites, so for both of them. And for the people that doesn't know how Mishnah function, Mishnah have 3 layers, like Mishnah, what is the written text, Gemara, what is the explanation of the written text, and Halakha was like theoretical talking what will be if the law was broken. So on the Gemara, when Gemara talking in Mishnah and Talmud, basically the conclusion is the valid. So you can read it like 60 pages, for instance, discussion about something, but what is on the last verse on the discussion, it's like conclusion and it's valid. So this discussion about marrying girls was finished on the Talmud Yavamot 61b verse 1, and that is the end. So it said, even he has a wife and he has children, he may not marry a sexually undeveloped woman, as she's zina, it's like forbidden. And first clause of the Mishnah about the priest, even though the halakha applies equally to Israelites. So this is one of the proofs that Mishnah and Talmud does not promote sex with prepubescent girls. Islamic apologists will try to tell you, well, Mishnah 5.4 telling that. No, Mishnah 5.4 is theoretical, is halakhat, is theoretical, speaking about what if the law is broken. What if some father married his sexually undeveloped girl to some sick man? They are considered, they suppose that his law is broken, but now they are in Mishnah 5.4 talking what are the obligation, what are the rights of that little girl. And it is the way of the Talmud function, like clinically and emotionally cold, But in 5.4 they are already know that the law is broken, because Yavmot 61a and 61b1 tell that is the forbidden. And also, if you continue to read Mishnah Nidach, you will see in the paragraph like 13b, I don't know, 6, maybe you can check it, that they are said that people who sleep with little children, with little girls that are not able to born children, are like lepers, and that they are delaying coming of the Messiah. And Jews are waiting Messiah even today. So we can continue, of course. This is also the Kiddushin 41a8, also said even about betrothal. Now it was the early times, 2nd century. So they are talking about even betrothal. In this Kiddushin was even opinion that the man cannot betrothal, not just that man cannot betrothal his daughter until she is a young woman. It's like nidach on Jewish. So at least 12 years, 1 day in signs of puberty. So we can see here that Mishnah and Talmud does not promote severe pedophilia. When you look at the context of the Torah, in the context of the Torah, age for marriage was even higher. You will see from like Song of Songs or Ezekiel chapter 16, when God described his marriage with the Israel like marriage of somebody with a girl. And from that context, you will see that girl not just reached puberty, but also physically, emotionally developed. And after some time after that, from the story, take her for a wife. But because of Jews' laws, their state, the temple was destroyed, and after the Bar Kokhba revolt, they were like annihilated and relocated throughout the whole Roman Empire. A lot of them ran away to the Persia. They was afraid that because they have no protection, that pagans, Romans and Persians, will rape their daughters or like capture them or seduce them. So they put little bit down that border for the marriage, but not before 12 years and 1 day in size of puberty. So it's not 3 years, people, and it's not 7, 9, or 10. So that sick stuff is exclusively like in Sharia. It's like hotel with 5 stars for the pedophiles. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that important clarification about understanding how the Talmud works, how Jewish sources work, and what the actual Jewish position is on marriage. It's very easy for someone who is uninitiated, doesn't know anything about the Talmud, to just do a word search, find a passage, copy one sentence out of context, not having the slightest clue how the text works, and think that it's somehow teaching doctrine in that
it's not
verse.
like our law, people. It's very, very different on the structure, of the development of the law. You have a lot of discussion in the Gemara, and the end of the discussion about that subject, not about the chapter, you will see, not about the subject. For instance, here the subject start in the 61b, but 61a, but was like finished in the 61b chapter. But about when you will see the end of the subject of the discussion, what you will read there, it's in 99.9% the law and the conclusion. Sometimes in that 0.01% can stay undecided, because but in that case for the Sephard Jew, they take then opinion from the, if for instance like teacher and student have discussion about something and they did not find conclusion, that then in that case the Jews take the opinion of the teacher, because they suppose that teacher know better than his student. So yeah, you must understand it.
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you for that important clarification. Definitely needed because you'll find plenty of Christians repeating the same kinds of charges against the Talmud, not understanding how it actually works. But the important thing for our purpose today uh, is that Allah, in His perfect law, takes this 3-month waiting period. Now, there's nothing actually biologically significant about 3 months. It's just an arbitrary number. You could say 4 months, you could say 5, you could say 2, you could go any number of different directions. The idea is that if you wait long enough, if the woman is pregnant, there will be visible signs of it. So you have this waiting period just to make sure that she's not pregnant. It's just an
3 months or
arbitrary,
three woman cycles, depends from
right.
the situation. But it's interesting that they said like Quran is God word and Sharia is perfect understanding of the God word. So they perfectly wrong make wrong understanding of of that verse, and you will see that verse derivated from the Mishnah Midah. So one more stuff that Persian tafsirists did not understand well, and they
Yes,
basically
as Phil
promote
points out, one cycle, he says 1 month, but he really should say one cycle would be sufficient to rule out pregnancy. And the all knowing creator of the universe should know how a woman's menstrual cycle works, even if the people of the time didn't. Now, the specific cases that the Quran's talking about, where someone is too young to menstruate or too old to menstruate, 3 months is a reasonable substitute. But remember that it's 3 cycles, or if they don't have cycles, 3 months. So
three
why
months.
does the
It's for the betrothal. If some have a fiance and he want to basically broke the betrothal, so she need also to wait 3 months, and they understand it that he already married her and slept with her. Oh my god. And unfortunately, because of that, we have not 1,400 but 1,300 or 250 years severe pedophilia, and who knows how much poor children was devastated because of this sick law.
Yeah, and I should also point out that 3 months doesn't guarantee anything because a woman could be pregnant and thus not having cycles and not have any visible signs by 3 months. There are women who have given birth without ever realizing they were pregnant because their cycle is irregular. They don't think anything about missing it, and they don't get a big giant belly like we associate with pregnancy.
And
You don't get
in
morning
Islam, you
sickness.
have yeah, in Islam you have also the woman that can stay up to 4 or even 6 years pregnancy. So crazy.
Exactly. So my point here is that there's nothing special about that number. That it's an arbitrary choice. It's not a perfect metric, even though it's found in Allah's perfect word. Uh, and since there's nothing biologically significant about that exact amount of time, it seems that it was just a cultural decision to go with 3 months. The same decision that we find in the Talmud.
Rabbis.
Uh,
Yeah.
It seems once again that the author of the Quran was drawing on the same social, cultural background as the Jewish rabbis, whether he was initiated in Jewish rabbinic teachings or not. And I happen to think that he probably was, and he was probably a failed rabbi who was kicked out of Judaism. But whether that's the case or not, he's clearly drawing from the same social context, even though this is supposed to be God's eternal word written from before the time human beings existed.
Should we
Rob,
start?
yeah, Rob from Sentinel Apologetics has joined the chat. Welcome, Rob.
Hey guys. I hope I'm
Hello?
coming in clear. Sorry,
Yep,
Thaddeus,
yep.
for the late entrance and also even your late reply to email. So, yeah.
Hey, no worries, no worries. We're glad that you're here and able to contribute to the chat. Why don't you go ahead and briefly introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Rob. I run Sentinel Apologetics as a hobby. I'm a Christian, became a Christian in 2015. Sentinel started in 2017. My approach is academic in the sense that that was my education in the field of engineering and astronomy, still working towards finishing my master's and becoming a Christian. My journey into Christianity started in 2010. 2015 was the result of that, from a rigorous critical scholarship sort of approach. I suppose what you'd call like a liberal scholarship approach, which ironically led me to Christianity. And now, in the last year, I've gone full guns blazing into Islam and the Quran. And the last couple of months, say the last 6 months, uh, I've I've been heavily intrigued by the intertextual and the inter pretty much everything with respect to the Quran and the prior texts that come about. And I know that, I mean, going into Islam, I was intimidated by, it's like, here we go again. Here's a whole new religion, a whole new sort of going back to the drawing board, psychologically seeing why are Muslims, why do Muslims believe what they believe? What's this Quran? You know, it's like this whole alien. It's like you have to like just start from scratch sort of thing, right? And then the one thing that intrigued me is exactly the title of the stream, Tales of the Ancients. I'm very familiar with the, say the Old Testament, the ancient Near Eastern backings for why the Old Testament exists, and then the Second Temple and Greco-Roman backings for why the New Testament exists. Is there such a thing for the Quran? The Muslim says no, it's directly from Allah. So the curious thing is that providentially, I've had enough training. I wouldn't say I'm a specialist like to the nth degree, but I've had enough training to have an eye to see, just like how I would look at an Old Testament passage and see how it's a polemic against the ancient Near East, or a New Testament passage how it's a polemic against the Greco-Roman world, which means that the authors are borrowing from those prior works. Does the Quran do the same thing? If it does, it's not from Allah. Or if it is from Allah, and this is something Muslims don't like, I've been recently they're offended by me for saying this, but Allah's a fanboy of those works, and in conclusion, what I've discovered is that, and this is a hypothesis I'm proposing, and I don't know of any other Christian that's proposed this, but I've been sharing it on Clubhouse and also on streams. I propose that the Quran is nothing but a rehashing of the last 500 years prior to it. So from the 1st century AD till about the 5th, 6th century AD, the Quran is nothing but a mishmash of all those works in an Arabic form. If I were to, in other words, just to summarize, if I was to take Adam to Jesus and we had no Bible, and I took Adam to Jesus in the Quran from an A to Z approach, And I hypothesized, okay, what would my Bible look like just through the lens of the Quran, from Adam to Jesus? So starting from Genesis, ending with Revelation, so to speak, right? But imagine it's a skeletal framework. What do we know about Adam? What do we know about Moses? Onwards till Jesus. The curious thing is that we we will come up with stories from Adam to Jesus that only match the stories of the last the 5 centuries that are prior to the Quran's existence. Because if I were to put it chronologically down, like Genesis to Revelation, according to the Quran, you won't find any parallels with the Bible, but you will find parallels with the Apocrypha, the Subigrapha, the Gnostics. You know, like your guest right now, we're talking about the Talmudic, Mishnaic sort of literature. And I have a few more to share from basically the latest edition of what's called the Legend of the Jews. So that was a compilation back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But then there's a brand new compilation published in Brill in 2003, where the Jerusalem Publication Society of Scholars added further footnotes, scholarly footnotes. And since I have the power of like Logos software to keyword search certain things, I just wanted to see every like Quran hit in that work. And there's a few that land, which I'd like to share to like bring this home, because who's speaking here? Is it Sasa?
Yeah, Sasha, also
I
known as Alexander.
Okay, I think I don't know if you've already shared this, but let me know if you have already shared it. But yeah, there's a few things I found that made me go, yeah, this is just this seals the deal, basically. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
so
introduction. Yeah.
welcome to the chat. I'll get the link to your channel added to the description after we're done. I definitely encourage people to check that out. Rob is definitely on the same page as me, wanting to take this very intellectual, rationalistic approach to looking at the truth of religion. So if you like my content, I'm sure you'll probably like his as well. Alexander, do you want to go ahead and share another example, and then we'll see what Rob wants to bring as well.
Of course. So this is for instance, example 6, Surah 21, 57 to 65, and Bereshit Rabbah 38, 13. So it's the story about Abraham. So let's say what's Quran tell us. Basically, in this story, Abraham was breaking the idols in his father's shop or house, never mind. And after he broke all the idols except the biggest one, he put the stick in his hands and said that the biggest one done it. So when his father and friends came, they was asking why you done this stuff, and he said, no, it was not me, it was the biggest one. And they told him, are you crazy? How that idol could broke others? And after that he told them, basically in mockery, do you hear what are you talking about? How you can worship the idols that cannot help themselves? And after that they reverted to their old ideas and bring him to the Nimrod, and Nimrod tried to burn him in the flaming furnace, but God saved Abraham from the fire. Same story you will find the Bereshit Rabbah. So let's see. Look at this. Also practically the same story. So he took a stick and broke them. He put the stick in the hand of the largest. After that, his father came, also his brother, and thereupon the largest arose, took the stick and broke them. Why do you make sport of me? Have they any knowledge? Terak said, Should not your ears hear what your mouth has said? Abraham said. So basically, almost the copy-paste story from the Bereshit Rabbah that was compiled about, let's say, 500 after Christ, but probably story originated a little bit earlier. But it was put in the Bereshit Rabbah Babylonian Talmud about early beginning of the 6th century, so before Quran. Also, we can saw this. This is basically the same story. Sorry, I didn't. This is the basically the same story. Now you can find it if you continue to read in the Bereshit Rabbah also that Abraham, it was like Nimrod was arguing with Abraham about monotheism, polytheism, and Nimrod want to kill him, put him in the flaming fire, but God rescue him. And the same story you will also find it in the Quran. We also have this kind of example, for instance, and this is very interesting. So I want people to a little bit pay attention about details.
Yeah,
So
real quickly before you go on there, I wanted to just make a brief comment about story of Abraham breaking idols. Of course, this is not found in the biblical text, just like all of these stories, that it must come from somewhere else. And it actually has a very interesting history of development of this story. Again, you may be familiar, Alexander, that Islam Critiqued has done a video on this, and the rabbinic musings directly relate to Zoroastrian beliefs, that they are written as polemics against the Zoroastrians, such that they weren't necessarily even getting these ideas from the biblical texts. Rather, they were writing them specifically to counter Zoroastrian ideas.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Sorry.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, definitely, if people are interested in more information on that, check out Islam Critique's video. I don't know the title at all.
Element of fire. Element of fire. Because Zoroastrians believe in the fire. Yeah. You will find it in the Apocalypse, I think, of Abraham. Also, the same story that he said, "Let's worship fire, let's worship water." But no, it's not really copy paste, but same point in the Quran. Abraham one day said, "I will worship the sun. It's not God. I will worship the moon. It's not the God. I worship the water, but it's not God. I worship the fire, but it's not God." It's basically the same story for the Apocalypse of I think Abraham. That also. Jewish apocryphal from the probably 1st to 2nd century originated, but on Syriac, later, little bit later, and they probably took the Syriac version. So yes. We will see this. This is now you can pay attention, people, because you will see a lot of very, very funny details. Also in the Chagiga 16a6 Talmud Chagiga, compound about let's say 5th to 6th century, it said that 6 statements were said with regard to demons. In 3 ways they're like ministering angels, and in 3 ways they're like humans. In Islam, also the jinns could be very fast. I don't know. I don't know for the looks like angels, but very fast, like in the blink of the eye, can go to one place to another, but also could take the shape of the humans or even the animals and breed and die, even die in Islam. So now Gemara is puzzled by this last statement. Should this enter your mind that they know this? So it's like the Barita specifies in 3 ways. They're like ministry angels. They have wings like ministry angels, and they fly from one end of the world to the other like ministry angels, similar to jinns, and they know what will be in the future like ministry angels. Pay attention about this last line. The Gemara is puzzled by this last statement. Should it enter your mind that they know this? No, even the angels I provide to the future. Later, they hear from behind the curtain what God reveals something of the future, like ministering angels. Now, also in the three ways, they are like humans eat, drink, multiply, and die like humans. In the same story in the Islamic narrative. Now look at this curtain, this lie that said that demons listen behind the curtain while God is talking to the angels. So God revealed to the angels some kind from the future that will happen, and demons hear it, and because of that, people who are like I don't know, sorcerers, witches, something like that, could predict the future. Now, look at the Islamic explanation. This is the Islamic UA, most famous Islamic page of the world. It was done by the students and professors of Medina University. So it said the same stuff, genes appear in human form. And the answer to this is proven in the Sunnah. Prophetic teaches from real life that the genes appear in different forms, such as form of people and animals, etc. Now, this is the question: how can fortune tellers can know the truth? Because only the God know the future. So the fortune teller told him something true that would happen in the future. Then happened, and he said it would. This is something that the shaitan snatched from him from the heavens, then pass it to the fortune teller. And now goes the explanation. They added lies on that, okay? This is the Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, point out where he explained this matter, and Bukhari Muslim narrated that Aisha said some people ask the Messenger of Allah about soothsayers, basically like people who know the future. The Messenger of Allah said to them, they are nothing. They said, oh Messenger of Allah, sometimes they tell us something that turn out to be true. The Messenger of Allah said, there is a word from the jinn that the genie snatches, and he catches onto the earth of his familiar as he can catch cackles, sorry for English, but they mix more than 100 lies within. Now, you will continue about explanations that basically that genes like climbing of one another, you know, and it was like a very, very big chain up to the heavens, basically, and they hear what God telling to the angels, and if sometimes God hit them with a lighting fire, but sometimes before they are hit, they like tell the jinn below him what they heard, and from that chain jinns tell to each other until that message came to the I don't know, that fortune teller, and because of that he know the truth. So now we have also little theological problem. We know that how big our universe is. So let's say for every square meter on the earth, you will find one gene, and let's say that one gene will be high like 100 miles. So even that. Now, if all the genes from the earth, from the every square meter that you have one gene, put one to above another, I suppose they could not reach the constellation of Orion, and definitely not reach the end of our galaxy. And we know that our galaxy is even just little small galaxy in the whole universe. So this is kind of Islamic understanding of the universe. Very scientific indeed. Also, the same stuff from Hanafi. Same basic explanation, that genes climb to one another, and they have close to the heaven some stations from which they would listen, and they find that they are guarded by angels before Muhammad came. But sometimes some of them manage to be stealthed and hearing something what God proclaimed to the angels, and before they are kicked and pursued with flames, they pass the message down through the other genes to the fortune teller. So now they are also explaining some, let's say, theological issue, because in Quran it said that only God know the future, but how now angels know, how the jinns know, and they are trying to reconcile this, telling us that only God know all the future, but some part of the future he will reveal to the angels, and if the jinns are hear it from the stealth, in that case that also jinns knew it. Also same story. This is explanation for Tafsir Jalalain, also Hanafi, see guidance Hanafi. So this is also that theological issue, but also you can see clear parallel from the Jewish sources, and also you can see the real problem from the Islamic understanding of the universe. For them, universe is much smaller, because jinn could climb through each other up to the heaven. So heaven should be not so far from us, but in the reality, we all know that is not the truth. So any more points?
Excellent. So just trivially first, a lot of people said that they couldn't read the texts. I made it bigger, but for future reference, you probably want to redo those slides, break it into more than one, because the text gets really small when you have that much on the screen at once. Now to the actual issue at hand, it's very interesting what we see here, that we see this speculation about being able to get up into heaven and hear the secret musings of God, that the angels can do it, that the jinn can do it. And this is actually the foundation of the idea of Merkabah mysticism, that the enlightened human mystic can elevate themselves into the throne room, and they can hear and observe God's plans. In other words, what we see, the famous Quran verse about throwing what are actually meteors at demons, shooting stars at demons trying to sneak into heaven, that it's based on this cultural idea that one can get into heaven while inhabiting the earth, that their mind can, at least, right? That their mind can go up into heaven and observe the secret plans of God.
Yeah, it's something very very similar. I find a lot of hadiths that are explaining universe in Islam very very funny indeed. Like before all the creation, God was some kind of cloud of air and water. So it's that mindset that you must put God in some box, in some shape. You cannot see that God is like energy or something. No, you must put it in some space. That is one of the reasons that you can see that stuff are not from God, that are like human thinkings and interpretations, because God transcends the even energy, and especially the space and the time. But in the hadith, you will also see that God is like in the cloud of the water and air. Sorry, Lloyd, for the microscope, but I didn't used to do this kind of stuff. I usually share the presentation with somebody, but today we didn't manage to do it. I don't know why.
Yeah, no worries. You're new to presenting, so not a criticism, just a point to remember for future, that most people are going to be watching this on a phone. Even if you're watching on a computer, it's still really small if you're not actually reading if you don't actually have the text in front of you to make it as big as you want, it'll be a little too small to read.
Yeah, I will in the future.
Yep. No worries though. I mean, we could hear your explanation, and Phil posted most of the links in the chat as well, so that people can go to the original source and look that up.
So basically,
Lloyd did point out.
Yeah.
Lloyd did point out that you're at 91% zoom, so you could switch to 100. Small difference, though.
Thanks, Lloyd. And basically, now genes are climbing to each other, and they are reaching heaven, or at least close to heaven. And said, where Allah decrees a matter in the presence of angels, a jinn will hear some information in stealth, and if not burned by a flame, pass it down below one after another until it reach earth. And that is the reason that fortune teller could sometimes show you the future. So
before we move on, I'd like to hear Rob's scientific opinion about the Quran here, because I'm sure he has some interesting things to say.
Yeah, he's astronomer, right? So let Rob explain us this small universe. What is the problem with this science from Hadith?
Yeah, my immediate reaction is you can do a very simple test. You can actually make your own little mini solar system if you wanted, like a solar system, not a galaxy. The sun, like a heliocentric model. Astronomers call it Lagrange points. So you can actually position planets. We can take, say, the mass of all the planets you put it together. The known shapes and sizes and the masses and so on. Just simple, like the Kepler's laws of motion, simple Newtonian dynamics. You don't have to go down into relativistic effects and all that. And then the interesting thing is that you need the size of the planets and you need the distances that they accommodate, so that, as we know it, like for the sun to move across the sky at a certain rate, for the sun to be at the distance that it is, for the Earth to rotate with respect to the moon and the Earth-Moon dynamics, plus all the planets and their positions, for Jupiter to be its size and its position, for Earth to be the so-called third rock from the sun. Like, we notice that there's all these data points when we structure like a puzzle piece. The solar system, its size and everything. And then that's basically freshman year, like a typical freshman astronomy class. And then you read what you just wrote. It's, like, my immediate reaction is, it doesn't surprise me that you have those descriptions, because Allah does not know best in that sense. It is nothing but a man or a person from a geocentric point of view, not a heliocentric point of view. Helio would be literally you're on the surface of the sun from a helio sense looking out, because you're the center of the solar system in that sense. But from a geocentric point of view, the phenomena that's going around you, you are then projecting that back onto the system, onto, in this case, the natural world. And that in itself is a telltale sign that how could Allah, unless you're telling me Allah is anthropomorphic and is not omniscient and is only perceiving reality through the lens of an Arabian prophet. So
definitely. Yeah. And I'm trying to get Rob on to talk about the cosmology of Islam and the Quran. It should be a very interesting topic when he has time for that. Did you have?
we need to do it.
Definitely.
Uh,
I'd happily do it. Yeah.
Alexander, did you have a couple more examples, or are you done?
Yeah, I have it, but I will be short, brief.
Okay.
Abraham Apocalypse, Bereshit Rabbah, also the same story about. This is when they took him to the Nimrod and they try to, kill him. They said, bury him, support your gods. If you are going to act, we said, all fire be coolness and safety upon Abraham. They planned to harm him, but we made them worse losers. Basically, also, you will find in the Bereshit Rabbah same story, that God save it from the fire. Also, you will find here Apocalypse of Abraham, that, so I would call the sun noble the earth. Abraham now talking about sun, stars, planets, water, fire, and the same story. He figured out that they are not like deities. Same stuff you will find in the Quran, that Abraham said, I will worship the moon, but I not will worship them. I will worship the stars, but I don't will worship the stars. I will worship the sun, but I will not worship the sun. So just to see that Abraham Apocalypse, Legends of Abraham, it's basic story from the Jewish Encyclopedia, datings and everything. Can be dated prior to 70 AD, but most people, scientists, dated like 79 to 81 AD. It's like some kind of Jewish apocrypha writings. And you see here in the Bereshit Rabbah, Abraham said, let worship water, and Moses said, let us worship the clouds, which are bear the water. Abraham, let us worship the clouds. He's basically, I think, from the context, joking with Nimrod. And after that, Nimrod put him the furnace, but Abraham descends into the fire furnaces and was saved. So after that, Nimrod asked him, of whose beliefs are you? And now this is the story. Basically, God saved Abraham, but his brother was also trying to save himself, and told the Nimrod that he is the same fate like Abraham, but he was lying, and Nimrod put in the flaming fire, and God did not save him. Now, this is also a very nice example. You will see this story, Surah 27:44, Sahih International Translation, about Solomon, the Queen of Sheba. She was told enter the palace, but she saw it. She thought it was a body of water, and uncovered her shins to wade through. He said, indeed, it's a palace whose floor is made smooth with glass. She said, my lord, indeed, I have wronged myself, and I submit with Solomon to Allah, Lord of the verse. Basically, Solomon made the, let's say, made, sorry for my English, floor from the glass, because he want to, so does Queen of Sheba have hairy legs? Yeah, that is the reason. And the tafsirist put also some, let's say, kind of explanation that said that Ibn Abbas said that was the first time that depilatory was made, And I don't recommend this book. I just take this book like example that was put quotation from the Targum Sheni, and it was the same stuff. It said also the same story, that Queen of Sheba entered the palace, and when she saw the floor with the glass, she thought it was a great surface of water, and she uncovered her legs, and Solomon saw it, and she said, truly I have done injury to my own soul, and I resign myself along with Solomon unto God, the Lord of all creatures. So almost word for word copied story from the Targum Sheni, and because Targum Sheni, it was written later, like 6th, 7th century, we can see here from the saints, there can be little, if any, doubt that the author based his story on the water vision episode of the Halakha tradition. It makes no allusion to the traditions about the celestial firmament, nor does it touch of any of the deeper issues and concerns of the ancient Midrash tradition. It seems, therefore, that the author simply appropriated the story from the Halakha tradition and adapted it to his own purpose, perhaps without much understanding of the deeper meaning of the story he was borrowing. And this is also the book, the author, and basic stuff is like this from the 3rd century, Halakha tradition. This story went to the Targum Sheni. It was dated 7th century, but probably 600, 605, 10, before the famous starting of the revelation, like Islamic history said. So it's very interesting story, and basically copy paste, and it is originated from 3rd century. So no, Targum Sheni did not copy from the Quran, but Quran copied from Targum Sheni. And this is the final example: life of Adam and Eve, care of treasures, and Surah 7:11-13. Thanks Islam critique for hint. I researched a little bit more. This is in the life of Adam and Eve, Greek version. All the angels was bought and they worship the Adam in the side of God, like the Slavic tradition. Also in the story of the cave treasures. This is just to show that this story predates Quran. And in the cave of treasures, Adam was made like a king, a priest, prophet, lord. Basically, these traditions, as I understand, trying to replace Messiah, Christ, with Adam. And let's look here. I find it. And the angels and the host of heaven heard the voice of God saying unto him, Adam, behold, I have made the king, the priest, and the prophet, and the Lord, and head and guardian of everything which had been made and created. And they shall be in subjection unto thee, and they shall be thine, and I have given unto thee power over everything which I have created. And when the angels heard this speech, they all bowed the knee and worshipped him, Adam. The revolt of Satan and the battle in heaven. And when the prince of the lower order of angels saw what great majesty he had given unto Adam, he was jealous of him from that day, and he did not wish to worship him. And he said unto his host, You shall not worship him, and ye shall not praise him with the angels. It is meet that ye should worship me, because I am fire and spirit, and not that I should worship a thing of dust, which had been fashioned of fine dust. Also, you will see here that this story predates Quran. That was basically originated from the, let's say, not Ephraim of Edessa, like people thought, but from the school of Ephraim of Edessa. And let's see what Quran tells us. Surah 7, verses 11-13. And we have certainly created you, O mankind, and give you human form. Then we said to angels, prostrate to Adam. So they prostrated, except for Iblis. He was not of these who prostrated. Allah said, what prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you? Satan said, I am better than him. You created me from the fire and created him from the clay. So basically the same story, because dust and clay, it's basically same things. You will here also find some article on Brill Encyclopedia, just to show that is not some fashion stuff by me. So basically almost the same story, just the little touch in the Quran was clay, and in the cave of treasures are dust, but it's also explained that as I know from the Jewish tradition, that from the dust and water was fashioned from the clay. Basically from the Jewish tradition, Adam was taken and made. You will find it also in the life of Adam and Eve. So basically also copy paste.
Excellent. I'll bring us back out to where you can see us. So I have some comments from the chat. Thank you for going through those examples quickly. Obviously, I could say some about each of them, but maybe
sorry, Thaddeus. I thought we are in a little bit rush because of the robes.
Yeah.
Because of that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I think it was fine to go through those, to get the data out there so people can see these. I would just point, my question to you would be, what is the nature of these sources that the Muslims are drawing from? Are these Jewish scriptures? Are these the works of rabbis? Or are they something else?
It's like some kind of apocryphal writings. and even with little Christian touch after that, as I understand. So it's not standard Christian or standard Jews writings, and that was like written after Christ, pretty much, and changed after Christ. So Cave of Treasures, uh, it's not copy paste from Life Adam and Eve. You will find in the earliest copies of Adam and Eve, you will not find, I think, all the story that Satan refused to worship Adam and Eve. You will find it also in the later edition. But in the Cave of Treasures, you can find the story. So it's that kind of story probably originated after Christ. So again, in the Islamic belief, between Christ and Muhammad, there was no new revelations. So indeed,
Yeah,
how this stuff was copied in the Quran then.
yeah, it's consistent with my understanding of these texts that they're not considered sacred or scripture by anyone, that they are, writings from random people that were rejected in the Jewish faith as well as in the Christian faith. There were stories that were floating around in the 7th century. We can see how an author who was a human being and was just trying to guess what was correct, how he could get these things confused. We can't really see how Allah would make that mistake. So we started with looking things from the Talmud, which does enjoy a semi-scriptural status in Judaism. It's not on the same level as the Tanakh, the Old Testament, but Judaism is authoritarian in that the collected opinions of the rabbis have weight, that they have weight. So we started with something that is at least semi authoritative in Judaism, but keep in mind that you have to know how to read the text. Not everything you read is the accepted opinion, right? You read opinion A, opinion B, opinion C, and then discussion about it, and
Yeah,
then only at
it
the
was
end.
invented after Christ. It
Right,
was
and
invented after
it was
Christ.
written right. The Jerusalem Talmud, the earlier text, was written around 250. The Babylonian Talmud is around 450. So we're talking about definitely after the time of Christ. Now, some of the traditions may date back further, but the text itself comes from that period. And the parts that are being copied are the commentary on the core text, which definitely comes from later. You could argue that the core text is the oral Torah that was revealed to Moses, but the parts that are being quoted, even Jews wouldn't say that about. So the Muslim is way off base when they think by saying oral Torah that they somehow have escaped the problem. Then you went into
We
other
cannot even
texts.
argue about that. We cannot even argue about that. For instance, for the first example, because that story basically was invented after Christ and after the story about the God left the mountain to protect Jew. Also, this story from the Cave of Treasures, it's I think it's like you cannot date it even the time of the Christ, not even like oral tradition, and
Right.
especially not in that details like you find in the Cave of Treasures. So basically, it's a lot of that stuff was invented pretty much later. So again, not even the dates go in the in the defense of the Quran. And basically
Correct.
we saw, but what is
Yeah.
more
So,
important here? It's north.
right.
It's again north, Iraq, Syria, Jordan. It's again north. It's not Hijaz. It's north that this story originated and was popular. So how then Quran was revealed in Mecca?
Correct. So I was just trying to summarize things. I wasn't trying to dispute anything you were saying by any means. I was just summarizing. So you started with the writings from the Talmud, and as you pointed out, we have to know how to properly interpret that text to say whether it's a Jewish belief or not. But from an academic standpoint, definitely after the time of Christ. Even from a Jewish faith-based standpoint, most of it would be written after the time of Christ, and would, because I mean it's attributed to specific rabbis who lived after that time. Only the text that they are making their commentary about would the Jewish faith position say that comes from the time of Moses, which isn't most of it and isn't related to anything that you quoted today. And then you looked at sources that aren't even accepted in Judaism at all. Like they have no standing whatsoever. They have no standing in Christianity. They were just writings of random people speculating, in theory, trying to write something that was true, but never became accepted by anyone. In some cases, they became popular stories. They became things that people like to repeat around a campfire, but they were never considered scripture. They were never considered truth. They were just speculation. And in a lot of cases, they're directly related to Merkabah mysticism, where the mystics are telling these stories, which they don't intend to be read as history. They intend them to be read in the mystical light that they have given them, like the story of the Queen of Sheba, for example. This is intended to be a lesson about recognizing whether there is glass or water, because this was one of the tests that the mystic had to pass in order to ascend into the throne room. They didn't intend it to be a description of a historical event, yet the Quran takes it as a historical event. And the tafsir reveal that they had the knowledge of the cultural background, because they add details that are found in the Jewish sources that are not found in the Quran. The Quran just makes a vague allusion, expecting people to understand the story. The tafsirs do understand the story, at least in many cases. Some cases they've forgotten what the Quran means, but in many cases, they understand the story. They add these additional details, which proves that the Quran is drawing from the 7th century cultural milieu that common sense says that it was written in, that a human being wrote it in that, but the Islamic faith position is completely different, that it's Allah's eternal speech. And that's why this evidence is so damaging. None of the evidence, by itself is like a massive problem. Like the copying this particular verse, if they didn't have that claim about it being Allah's literal speech, wouldn't necessarily be problematic, because the Christian understanding of scripture is that the author is inspired, but they're drawing upon their own culture to bring out these inspired ideas, to explain God's plan for humanity in language that they understand. So if the Islamic position was like that this was a work of an inspired prophet in the 7th century, we might say we might be okay with some of these things. Some of them clearly show the author didn't know what he was talking about, but some of them, at least, we would say that this is in line with the Jewish Christian tradition of how a prophet operates. But the problem is the Islamic position isn't that. Their position is that this is Allah's eternal speech written before a human being was created, which makes absolutely no sense. I want to take a couple comments from the audience, and then I want to see some of Rob's examples as well. Lloyd says the first schools of Islamic law, Kufa, were next to the 3 major Jewish seminaries in Surah and Edita. Sorry about the pronunciation there. But that's compatible with what you are saying, Sasha, that it's all happening in the north, that the development of Islam is happening in the north. And not only that, it's directly in the same area where Jewish thought was most prevalent.
Yeah, it's basically that kind of story, and I think Mecca, from some reason, was invented later, probably from Umayyads or Abbasids. I don't know, to cover up something, or I really don't know the reason. It's mystery for me, but probably for no good reason. Definitely, So
And I have
now
this
we should find
super,
why, basically.
right, yes. Yeah, we can figure out how based on the text, or I mean, from where it came from based on the text. We can't necessarily figure out the motives. That requires a bit more speculation,
Yeah.
if you will. Super chat from Simple Jack here that he wants to ask if the following four concepts: jizya, killing of apostates, taqiyya or lying, and halal or manipulating, are exclusive to Islam, or if there are other religions in human history that also have these traits. So thank you very much for that super chat, first of all. To answer your question, I don't think of immediate predecessors to these particular doctrines that probably weren't necessarily part of early Islam that developed over time. I wouldn't say they're exclusive, though. I mean, these are kind of human traits here, right? Well, what is jizya? Well, that's extracting money from your captives, the people you've conquered. Killing apostates. I can't think of another religion that would have a specific penalty for killing apostates, but every religion has some sort of opposition against apostates. So that makes perfect sense as development of human ideas. Lying, of course, humans lie. Nothing, no explanation needed there. As long as we're looking at it as, a human developed concept. If it's coming from God, well, then, yeah, we need an explanation. And manipulating one another as well, very human trait. Any thoughts you guys want to add on these particular concepts that Simple Jack has asked about?
No, I'm fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say.
Although, am I meant to be seeing all of this on this, or am I meant to be on YouTube as well, like the YouTube tab?
So I'm sharing the same thing that they're seeing. So you're seeing everything that they're seeing.
Because all I see is you and me.
Oh.
Well, I am in the. I also don't see Rob, but I saw Tadius.
Let me make sure that I have this set up right here.
No, your YouTube is
on
okay. Like YouTube is
YouTube is
running
okay.
fine.
Yeah. I meant that. You know what? I was sharing the wrong camera to you. So there you go. I was sharing the wrong thing. So you definitely were not seeing what I intended you to see. Doesn't want to switch
Am I meant to click a
So
button, or do I wait
no.
for you to...
I'll fix it the next time I'm not talking.
Okay.
so that the audience doesn't have to sit here while I figure out how to get your view fixed. But they're getting the right view. So that's no, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't realize that I had shared the wrong view. So Gabriel says, referring to one of the stories that you shared, Abraham, Nimrod, and Queen Sheba are all in the same time period? ? Is he mixing up two of the stories you shared, or did one of them actually have them all in the same time period?
No, he's mixing up because it was two examples. It was example 9 and 10. So he probably mixed examples. Yeah. It's
okay.
Example 9, example 10 from the presentation. I will actually. I think I sent you this presentation through the email. So free to share it. Whoever can use it. I don't have problem with the authorship, so take it. It's not a problem.
Excellent. I will get that posted as a link later on that. Okay, yeah. So still not quite sure why that's not coming through, but moving on. So let's see. Lloyd also pointed out that modern studies of the origin of the Sirah literature acknowledge the influence of previous scriptures and their elements. And then he pointed out that this is known even in Islam, where they call this material Israeliyat. So even the Muslims are acknowledging that they're, at least when it comes to the biographies of Muhammad, that it's contaminated with outside sources, that it's not entirely truthful. A very interesting acknowledgement, I would say. All right, there you go. Now you should see the correct thing.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
see.
there we go.
Yeah, I was sharing the wrong camera, and then I was accidentally switching the audio, which you're not even hearing because you're hearing me directly, which was doing nothing, of course, because I wasn't switching the video. And then one more comment from the audience, or a question from the audience, I should say. Peter asks, where does the story of the talking ant come from? Do either of you know offhand why the Quran might have decided that Solomon was talking to ants? All right, that's one for further research then. Rob, did you want to share some some additional examples of borrowing from Jewish sources?
Yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'll go from there. And feel free also, Alexander, to make your comments as well.
Okay,
and I'm also
yes.
going to try and make it large enough so people can view it. Is it being shared?
So at the moment, I'm seeing the us. Is what
Okay,
I'm
do
seeing.
you see this now?
Yep, there you go. Yep, it's up.
Okay, sweet. So I have the power of technology, as we all do, but this time with respect to a library. So this is what's called the LibreNext digital library system. I'm able to practically search the entire Quran in all the digital books, well, all the technical scholarly works, commentaries, and so on, into digital format, so that through the power of the computer, you can, whatever scholars have landed on, or if they have cited the Quran in any form, let's just see where the hits land. And sure enough, I have this particular work called Legends of the Jews by Ginsberg, but this was a work back in, if you see over here, back in 1909, okay? But Brill, which is a major publication, peer-reviewed publication area of research, was able to republish this work, but also through the aid of what's called the Jewish Publication Society. So in other words, from 1909. Notice all the editions that have transpired since, and the latest version of this is 2003, which means scholars since then, right? So translated from the German manuscript. Here are the modern day scholars who have taken this and have added further footnotes, hence introduction to the notes, right? So systematically, as you can see on the left here, systematically from page 15 down to page 1013, there are, according to this work called The Legends of the Jews, which is nothing but a compilation of all the Jewish literature from Second Temple all the way up through the rabbinic sources. So basically from creation all the way up to the destruction of the temple and beyond. It's a compilation of all those works, and then scholars who have credentials and have knowledge of, say, like in this case, since we're discussing Islam, say Islamic connections, immediately make these connections. So I just want to quickly highlight a few just to show you how the scholars themselves, and this is not some hack job. This is a work that is published in a major publishing company known as Brill. So, for example, in the context of, say, the third day of creation, all right, we have something like this according to rabbinic literature. Under each canopy, there's a table of precious stones, pearls, 60 angels. Go and eat with joy of the honey, for thou hast busied thyself with the Torah. She is sweeter than honey. And drink of the wine preserved in the grape since the 6 days of creation, for thou hast busied thyself with the Torah, and all this stuff, right? Now, notice here, footnote 79. This is now the modern scholars coming in and giving a comment saying that, look, there's 4 streams that are frequently mentioned in these legends. So Second Enoch and Alexander, if you're able to see these references over here, feel free to take
I
note.
saw it. I saw it.
By the way, do you speak Hebrew or Arabic? Just out of curiosity, because what's going to happen is they're going to cite the Quran, and there's a few statements in here in Arabic and Hebrew that they'll mention. But in this example, while in the Quran the stream of oil is replaced by a stream of fresh water, it is just this stream of balsam which is frequently alluded to in the rabbinic literature, because the Quran speaks about, you know, in paradise there's going to be these 4 particular streams, and sure enough, the Quran's version of Eden is that it was in heaven, not on earth. And here's a very subtle confusion where the Jews are saying that this is happening in Eden on earth, the 4 streams, whereas the Quran takes it to mean that it's something that will be yet in heaven. In regards to the fall of Satan, so for example, Alexander just brought up the life of Adam and Eve, but believe it or not, this is also outside that life of Adam and Eve. Again, I won't read through all this, but as you can see in how I've highlighted this, that Satan was forced to acknowledge the superiority of the first man. Nevertheless, he broke out in wild outcries that reached the heavens, refused to do homage. There's your prostration to Adam. The host of angels led him by him did likewise in spite of the urgent representation of Michael, who was the first to prostrate himself before Adam. And Michael addressed Satan, give adoration to the image of God, but if thou dost, then the Lord God will break out in wrath against thee. If he breaks out in wrath against me, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. This is Isaiah 14 language.
Yeah.
And look at this, footnote 35. There's your Vita Ade. This is Life of Adam and Eve. Can you see this, by the way, at the top here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because hopefully this is not cutting the screen out. But
no, it's okay.
So it's not just Life of Adam and Eve, which, by the way, I can open this and here it is. I actually have the Life of Adam and Eve corpus. But notice there's the Jewish reference, and then this assertion concerning the fall of Satan, whose jealousy brought about Adam's misfortune, is widely known. And lo and behold, here's the Quranic reference.
Apocalypse of Sedrach.
Yeah, up here. Yeah. All of these over here. So there's basically that. Let's see if there's anything down here. Nope. Okay.
So to the point there that this isn't controversial in scholarship. Scholars have no problem with saying that the Quran is borrowing from these sources, drawing from the same cultural background. Muslims will tell us that there's no evidence for this, or scholars have never made that claim or anything, something along those lines. But in reality, it's not even controversial. It's not even something that is discussed in great detail, because it's just taken as a given because the evidence is so overwhelming.
Now, this one, I think you'll love, because Alexander, I know you're going to love this.
Yeah.
Abraham. So this is now with respect to the fire of the Chaldeans. He destroys the images, the
Yeah.
idols, and he's thrown into a fire. Now this really blows me away. This is pre-Quran, but post Jubilees. So sometime in the centuries in the Common Era, but prior to the 6th century.
Yeah.
And
Between
it says
Jesus and
this.
Muhammad.
Yeah, Abraham was finally pleased, So when the angels received the divine permission to save him, Gabriel approached him and asked, Abraham, shall I save thee from the fire? He replied, God in whom I trust, the God of heaven and earth, will rescue me. And God, seeing the submissive spirit of Abraham, commanded the fire, cool off and bring tranquility to my servant Abraham. Now, footnote 33. Literally, may cooling and comfort be granted to my servant Abraham. This is a literal translation of, there you go, in the Quran. Because in the Quran,
Oh boy.
when you actually go, I have Yusuf Ali's translation. We said, O fire, be thou cool and a means of safety for Abraham. So, how curious that in Jewish literature, you have the same exact phrase verbatim, cool off, bring tranquility to my servant Abraham. And now notice this, the scholars are wondering, okay, which came first? Do you think the Jews read the Quran and put this down in there? And notice the scholar goes, so this literal translation has already been observed by Grunbaum. Here are so in the old sources, there's all the Jewish sources that have the saying. It is stated that Gabriel, according to some Michael, hastened to come to Abraham's assistance, but God checked the angel and he himself delivered Abraham. Now, the latter part of the text is corrupt. There's two versions of Abraham's deliverance. Wait, actually, let me go up. Where is it mentioned over here? I wonder if this is. I remember that coming across a footnote. Maybe it's down. Maybe it's down here. Oh yeah. Okay. 34. Yeah, I think this is the footnote. So the scholar is replying back saying, I cannot state with certainty whether this manuscript of this midrash found in the library goes back to Constantinople edition or not, or something like that. But coming down to where is it?
Well, I see the Quran mentioned
Here
there.
we go. He goes.
Okay.
Here we go. He goes.
Targums also said.
So this supposition, which is of frequent occurrence, the author of the original. Okay, here it is. The author of the original, however, was a Jew and not a Mohammedan, since parallels from rabbinic literature might be given to a great part of this booklet. So in other words, the scholars are replying back saying, yeah, it's the origin here is not from Muslims, but rather originally from Jews.
Yeah, it may further observe that the stain in the furnace is most likely remissions of the Haggadah concerning the three youths from the Bible, basically.
Yes. Yeah, in Daniel 3, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and so here we go again. Gabriel appears to Abraham to show him a well of water which he needed for an ablution before praying. This is genuinely Jewish and not Islamic. Yeah, and another one. Description of God as he who sees but can be seen, though found in the Quran, is of frequent occurrence in rabbinic literature.
Targum,
Okay.
Jerusalem Targum. Yeah, he's definitely predate Quran. It like 400 years at least.
Right. So there's basically that. This really rocks my socks, because it says like cool off, bring tranquility to my servant Abraham, and that's like word for word in the Quran. Okay. How about this one is going to be hilarious, okay? The Sabbath breakers, okay?
Yeah, monkeys.
No.
Yeah, don't get away.
In the Quran, it has Allah literally transforming the Sabbath breakers into literal monkeys. Whereas, so here's basically a summarization of what's happening over here. And in this particular footnote, you have this discussion about it. I'll just come down over here. It says, in fact, Alexander, read this bit for me, this highlighted bit.
According to Toshefta Yevamot 110 and parallel passage in the Babli and Yerushalmi, probably Yerushalayim Talmud, the high priest family of Kaifa, ape, Jewish ape, hailed from Bet Mekoshesh, the house of the stick gatherer, in view of the legend, undoubtedly Jewish, found in Quran, Surah 2, Ayah 60, that Moses transformed the Shabbat breaker into apes. One is inclined to trace some connection between the Kaifas, apes, and their place of origin, the house of the stick gatherer, the Jewish letters, being the typical case of the Shabbat breaker.
Right.
Shabbat,
So,
in Hebrew.
so the Hebrew term or the phrase stick gatherer is a derogative term because don't forget, they were breaking the Sabbath by gathering the sticks, right? So there's you know how in Jewish, like, Jews can be very, like, they use metaphors and terms in sometimes derogative ways. So in other words, what other creature is also stick gatherer? Oh yeah, monkeys. So you're like a monkey. You're like an ape. You're breaking the Sabbath and you're acting like monkeys. The Quran takes it literally.
Quran take it literally. Yeah. You have also note 790. Let's put the note to see what the note said here. 790.
Oh, C note, C note 790. Okay, this is the note. So this is basically, according to standard halakha, only the bodies of the blasphemers were hung up on gallows. This is talking about what happened when they broke basically the Sabbath. There's no mention of the Quran over here or Islamic. This is just more Jewish discussions. But this is interesting because, see, the sentence that Moses received from God was executed in the presence of all the community by stoning him. This was according done. So what's behind this? Because, see, it's like it's talking about the Sabbath breaker, right? The Quran also talks about the Sabbath, the Jews who broke the Sabbath, and then that apparently Allah transformed them into monkeys. But no, the Jewish discussion, okay, this is not in the in the Torah. This is Jewish
discussion,
tafsir on exactly, on the Torah, where there's this added mocking term that the Hebrew letters and the spelling is close to ape, and you're collecting sticks on the Sabbath, so you're like an ape. It doesn't mean the person literally becomes an ape.
The high priestly family of Kaifa.
And notice this, in view of the legend, undoubtedly Jewish.
Yeah, undoubtedly Jewish.
Yeah.
Oh well. Somebody didn't understand it, right?
Yeah. I think that should do. I know there could be others, like if I go here, Oriental, there's all these, so here are all the Quran references in the index of this work. But yeah, it'll just, I could just go on and on. Here's again on the transformation of men into apes. There's again the mention of the Quran. Well, actually, the funny thing about this, okay, in fact, let me just go here because this is interesting. With respect to the fall of the angels, right? When you actually wait, let me go back before this. Okay. Here's the other ape transformation text. With respect to, this is prior to Genesis 6. This is during Genesis 4, like Enosh. It
Yeah.
says here, the generation of Enosh, the first idol worshippers, the punishment for their folly was not delayed long. God caused the sea to transgress its bounds. Portion of the earth was flooded. And then still another consequence of the sin of Derek was that the countenances of the men of the following generations were no longer in the likeness and image of God as the countenance of Adam, Seth, and Enosh had been. They resemble centaurs and apes, and the demons lost their fear of men. Footnote 55. So as soon as this generation committed three, and here's the Jewish references, by the way. As soon as this generation committed three sins, adultery, murder, and incest, these three visitations came upon them. The ocean flooded the third part of the earth. There arose mountains, valleys, rocky ground, and man's stature was shortened. The overflowing of the ocean in the time of Enosh is frequently alluded to, and here's the Jewish references. On the transformation of men into apes, compared with, so that's the stick gatherer one, and the notes appertaining to it, and Enoch, where it's specifically talking about women seduced by the angels, right? Transformed into sirens, and then the Quran. That's the only times you'll ever have this understanding of men being transformed into apes. These texts over here, nothing to do with the Bible.
It's very useful, believe me, because I will find online this from the Sepharia probably, or somewhere else. I have one free rabbi, and I will find all these references and make a couple PowerPoints. So if you want it, I could also give it to you. You already have it like in this kind of form, but if you like it, I could send you. Yeah, it's very useful stuff.
So we have a sort of Muslim who just entered the chat. He is a believer in Chrislam, as we would call it. He says, God does not change, so the revelations give to Rasul Allah will and should match the revelations given to the prophets before him. What you are sharing validates the Quran. Well, I know that you just, other than the fact that you didn't say anything previously, I know that you didn't enter the chat before because this makes no sense, that these things that we are talking about have nothing to do with revelations given to a prophet. I've opened up the stream and it looks like he has joined us. Welcome to the chat.
Yeah, if
I'm looking for you. He's
Hello?
yeah,
Did you
it's
want
like
to dispute with us whether this is evidence against Islam? And he's gone. All right. I don't know what that was about. I'm not actually sure that was the same person. It might have been someone else. But I know that Masi Muslim has come and talked to us before. So if you want to come and talk to us about how you think that what we've been talking about today, which granted you haven't seen, validates Islam, then we'd love to have you. If not, we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes.
Masih Muslim, when you telling that Quran is just continuation of God prophecies and word, tell me how Ginza Rabbah from Sabaeans could be word of God that was like written and made from after Christ and from some Gnostic beliefs, Jewish but Gnostic beliefs, like mixing the old Judaism and some Gnostic beliefs, and that stuff from Ginza Rabbah went to the Quran. And Sentinel Rob, you should find Ginza Rabbah and do some kind of research, because I saw you are very versed in the that kind of analysis, and you will find a lot similarities between Ginza Rabbah and the Quran and even the Hadith, Sahih Hadiths from Bukhari, Muslim, and Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, etc. So tell me, Masih Muslim, if the story was generated like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, and it was generated basically from the infidels, not just infidels for the Muslims, but infidels for the Jews, from the Christians, how that story was copied in Quran, find a way into the Quran, and how how Quran is for God. Doesn't have sense, man. Also, you have a lot of stories from the apocryphal gospels that is proven that not just was not written by the apostles, but what was written like 100, 200 years after the death of apostles, and was claiming some lot of nonsense, and that nonsense was put in the Quran, man.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to the chat, Masi.
Thank you for having me. You see, the thing is that if you look at the Quran, what I see is Prophet Muhammad, he started with the message of monotheism. And when he started with the message of monotheism, the Jewish Sanhedrin was with him. And they, in fact, supported his message. But later on, when he started promoting Jesus as the Messiah of mankind, they turned against him. And that's what happened, according to my little input, I would say.
So thank you for sharing your perspective. However, we would like to discuss with you what we were talking about today. I know you weren't here the whole time, so I don't expect you to know the specific texts, but I want to ask you this general question first. If the Quran, which claims to be the eternal word of Allah, is copying from or has information shared with, let's put it more neutrally, has information shared with non-inspired texts, not the Torah. We're not talking about the Torah. We're not talking about the gospel here. We're talking about writings that within Judaism were not considered inspired. They were considered the writings of rabbis. They were considered heretical writings. They were considered speculation of mystics. If it shares that information and passes it off as fact, is that not proof that the Quran is not the literal speech of God? So you are muted at the moment. I don't know if that was intentional.
Yeah. Basically, you see, what I see is as long as the message.
Your audio cut out.
I think his connection is bad.
Yeah, I think you may be having connection issues.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, go. Start from the beginning. We didn't really hear much.
Yeah, the thing is, as long whether it's from the Torah or not, what we have to look at is it actually conveying the same message at the end of the day? Because nothing has come in written form from heaven with the exception of the 10 Commandments. So even the Torah wasn't by men. And they had to choose what has to be put in, what does not have to be put in the scripture. So if you're adding anything that let's take it as an addition, if it jives with the message of the Torah and the Injil and the other books, it should be considered as okay. Why to present it as something that is, unless it goes against the message, it shouldn't bother anyone.
Well, what if it does contain completely different information?
Such as?
I mean, you want to boil the message down to there is one God. Well, you can find that in dozens of different religions. You know, Islam is not the message that there is one God. There's a lot more to Islam than that. Wouldn't you agree? Masi, do you agree that there's more to Islam besides the simple message that there is one God?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
But
So here's the thing, right? The sources we looked at, and again, I know you didn't see them, but they're telling these tales which are legendary. They're not based on history. They have nothing to do with history. And then the Quran is repeating those stories as if they are history. It says explicitly they are history. Is that not an error? Assuming we're correct. I know you haven't seen the sources, so you can't dispute them. But assuming that that's a correct statement, that these information that was not historical is passed off as historical in the Quran, isn't that a problem?
Yeah,
Or wouldn't
basically,
that be
yeah,
a
I
problem?
would say, yeah, that would be a
I'll be
problem
right
if
back,
it's.
Thaddeus.
Yep,
Yeah,
no
you're
problem.
right. You're right. If it doesn't jive with history and it's not the fact. Now, there's so many things which people are bringing up, even to do with Jesus, his crucifixion, even his existence. Now, one could say whether what they are saying and what historians are saying is this. Now, which one would you go with? So that is the problem.
Well, okay, so first of all, I dispute your claim that historians are going against. I mean, of course, you can find individual people who are disputing elements of the gospel, the history found in the gospels, I should say. I would dispute that there is the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. Plus, our view of inspiration is not the same. The Islamic view of inspiration is that the Quran is the literal speech of God. The Christian perspective on inspiration is that the Bible is the work of prophets who are inspired by God, but they're using their cultural understanding of the world to write the text, which creates a very different expectation as to what you'd find in the text. If you think that it's being written by human beings who are inspired, you would expect references to the contemporary culture. If you think it's written by God before the creation of the first human being, and you find only references to 7th century culture when it was supposedly revealed, that's very problematic because it reflects the culture in which it appears to have been written, but not the culture in which, or not God's eternal speech. You know, it's reflecting a specific time and place.
Now, let me ask you, do you take the Bible to be the inerrant word of God?
I take it exactly as I explained the Christian interpretation of inspiration, that it's the work of human beings acting under the inspiration of God.
Okay.
It is correct in everything that it intends to teach, but that doesn't mean a modern person looking at the text will instantly understand everything of it. And if they read it with their own culture as the background, then they may come to an errant interpretation of the text because they don't actually understand what the author was intending to convey.
What the author was intending to convey, right?
Right. So yeah. So in other words, it would make sense to the original audience, and we can understand it with study, but we wouldn't necessarily, on the surface level of reading, get it right every time.
So if I try to understand it, what we have to see is what the author is trying to convey, right?
Yes.
Now,
correct.
Of course, what I say is the Arab hegemony takes it as the Quran to be like the inerrant word of God. Whereas if you study history, with the Zairs and Zabars were not there initially, and one word pronounced differently could come out with a totally different meaning, and these were added later. So if you go into that, and one should say, okay, how can it be like what the Muslims are claiming? That is not the right thing. What we need to do is, okay, what does it convey at the end of the day? Does it convey?
Okay, so I'm willing to accept your position, but I want to clarify that this is not the Islamic position or the standard Islamic position. You're saying that the message matters and not the precise details, which is something a Christian might say about the Bible, that it's intending to convey a specific message. And when you're looking at tiny little details and critiquing those, you're not treating the text the way it should be treated. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I agree totally. And
okay, so
go ahead.
So now so I'm willing to accept that position, even though, again, it's not a standard Islamic position. I'm willing to accept that position. Now, here's the thing. You actually need some basis for believing in the text to begin with. If your basis, if you're going with this basis that you're prescribing, then, it's not really the literal speech of Allah, that it's conveying a particular message. That's quite possibly what the author of the Quran would have intended you to read it. However, you have to have a reason to believe that the author of the Quran is someone you should trust. So my question to you would be, why do you trust in the Quran?
Basically, as it says, it talks to the Prophet, I've given you nothing new. It's the same message given to the prophets before you, right? And it also says in Surah Yunus 10:94, when in doubt, O Prophet, when in doubt, refers to the people of the Torah and the Injil. So it is saying, okay, how do you know whether this is God's word? Is you check it out with the Torah and the Injil. If it jives with the Torah and Injil, it's from God. So if the Prophet Muhammad is being given these instructions in the Quran, what about scholars and all of us? We got to do the same.
Okay, that's a very interesting statement you just made, that when in doubt you should consult the Torah and the Injil. What then is the purpose of the Quran, other than what it claims to be, is bringing the same message in Arabic so that people who speak Arabic can understand it? What is the purpose of the Quran then to us who have the Torah and the gospel available in languages that we understand?
Exactly. You see, first of all, if you look at it, take the Jewish position. The Jewish position till now also is that, okay, it's just for the Israelis, the chosen people, the chosen ones, right? And if that's the position, then how do the Arabs get this message? Then it has to come in some other form, in some other language. So it's the same message, but in Arabic, because of the stance which the Jews have.
Right. So I see the purpose, the theoretical purpose of it to the 7th century Arab. What is the purpose of the Quran to the modern reader? We're told often by Muslims that you have to know Arabic to understand the Quran. Most of the world doesn't understand Arabic. I have Bible translations available in English. I have Bible translations available in Arabic. The Quran seems to defer to their authority. So now that we have these translations available, what is the lingering purpose of the Quran?
And why Quran was in Arabic? Why God did not reveal him on some other universal language like Syriac or Greek? Because in that time, Greek and Syriac was very, very common languages throughout the Persia, throughout the Roman Empire. Probably even Hindus in the ports knew Greek or Syriac. Why on Arabic then?
Can I ask I think a relevant question here is, let's just go directly to, what does the word Quran mean?
Syriac word. It's Syriac word.
It's taken from, it's stolen from Isaiah, actually. Cry out. It means is actually, and it's said to be a recitation, but that's not really what it is. It is to declaim something, it can be to recite, but declaim, to proclaim, to
lectionary or teaching or something.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
and it's also a word for lectionary as well. Yeah, that's why,
I'm wondering,
because it's oral.
Yeah, so,
I'm
we'll
wondering.
have lost Mossy.
Okay.
Oh, he's back. Good. All right. You lost connection briefly there, Mossy, but you're back now. So Rob has
I'm
a
back.
question
Can you hear
for
me?
you. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I want Marcy's explanation on this, because I wanted this is where the rubber hits the road. Marcy, do you believe that the Quran, you know, the whole like Angel Gabriel requesting to Muhammad to, you know, Iqra, is the Quran, the book that we have today called the Quran, is the Quran directly from the thoughts of Muhammad, or is it information that Allah reveals within Muhammad to then recite out? Is that what you believe the Quran is? Like, what's your belief or what the Quran is? Is it directly from Allah?
You see, as I said, the Quran, no holy scripture, which we term as holy, whether it be the Torah, the Injil, or the Quran, nothing came from in the written form from God. It was an inspiration, and it came through inspiration, and it was given to the people, to the scribes, to the Sahabas.
That's not what the Quran says either.
Wait. What does that look like? Like, imagine I'll pretend to be Muhammad. So, and Thaddeus is skeptical about my claim that I'm speaking on behalf of Allah. So what would it look like if I was to role play that situation? What am I meant to do now to Thaddeus?
Now, if you're coming to Warqa bin Nawfal with that thought, and Warqa bin Nawfal says, okay, what revelations you're getting are from God, what would you say to that? Because he happened to be a Christian scholar or something like that, right?
No,
I'm just the thought experiment is very simple. It's I'm role playing Muhammad. What am I meant to do to Thaddeus if I was to come up with a certain surah or a certain ayah? What does that look like? Would I be something like, would I tell Thaddeus, oh Thaddeus, thoughts just come to mind, and then I recount what would be an ayah? Is that what happens?
A thought was revealed. You will come, and if you say a thought, then but if you say, oh, this is the revelation I received through the angel Gabriel, now then it makes a different thing. If you say it's just a thought, then it would mean something different.
Okay, is it okay, is it from Allah if I have a supernatural being like Gabriel coming to me and telling me what would then become the ayah, and then I repeat that to Thaddeus? Is that what the Quran is?
Yeah, that would be the Quran. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. Now, here's where this gets interesting. This is where the rubber hits the road. So the Quran is not, just to summarize, the Quran is not an original thought that comes from my own mind, or in this case, Allah putting those thoughts in my mind to then recite out, but rather a supernatural beings coming to me and giving these ayahs that then becomes what we now call the Quran in its completion. So what's interesting then is that when the Quran, which ultimately is through the supernatural being, gives details about biblical figures like Adam, Moses, Jesus. I'll just use those three main names. And if I were to go to my Bible, I find nowhere in my Bible any description of Adam, Moses, and Jesus the way the Quran describes them. But I will find their descriptions in fallible human commentaries on those people, but only a few centuries prior to the Quran. So in other words, it's literally now a fork in the road of two options we can decide from this point moving forward, that there's a legitimate supernatural being that was legitimately interacting with Muhammad. And let's pretend also for this, and that's another fork in the road as well in that it's genuinely the angel Gabriel, like it's the good angel. The only conclusion then I can infer is that Gabriel, ultimately from Allah, is a fanboy of these late works, these extra-biblical works. They're not originally of the Bible, but rather these are fallible interpreters. So the Talmud, did I lose connection?
No, you're still there.
No,
He's not.
Masi.
He's probably Masi's
He-
probably able to hear us, but I think that he drops out. But I think he can still hear us.
Yeah, he has a connection that keeps dropping him, but he comes back right away, so don't worry about it. Just keep talking.
Okay, so Allah, and then obviously Gabriel, is a fan of these works, and apparently not the Bible. because only those works are repeated in the Quran.
So I think his fundamental problem is that he thinks that these come from prophets. So he keeps thinking that these works are from other prophets, and somehow the Bible is just missing it or corrupted or whatever. He's not understanding that it's like the TV series The Chosen. So there's a TV series that has some stuff from the Bible in it, except it's like way even far beyond that. But it has a lot of things from the Bible in it, but then it has a lot of other stories that the creator, Dallas something or other, he made up. And he's actually a Christian, so what he makes up it isn't heretical, so it isn't like against God, but he makes up conversations that don't exist in the Bible, and he's making them up out of his own mind. And he's making these stories to entertain people, but also to get them interested in what the Bible actually says. And he never says, hey, I'm a prophet and these stories are absolutely true. Rather, he's trying to convey a religious message, but using fiction inspired by scripture. And so imagine that somebody comes 100 years later and talks about what Jesus did and says that God told me that Jesus did something, but then describes things that only happened in The Chosen, which is a TV series that was made up by a guy who, yes, is trying to teach moral things, but he's not a prophet. He's making up fictional stories. And that's what the Quran has, and all of the hadith that they draw from all of these fictional things, some of which are, apocrypha. I guess The Chosen could be considered to have a lot of apocrypha in it, and some of which are like completely heretical and from other belief systems that just tried to run off with the stories in the Bible and do different things with it. So I think he's having a hard time grasping the source of these things, that they're not prophets.
So Masi keeps coming in and out. I think he's having trouble with his connection. We'll give him a little bit more time to hopefully get that ironed out. But obviously, it's a little difficult to talk to him when his connection's not working very well. I did see Safraz in the chat. I think he was just a hit and run. He said to remember me when you're in hellfire. And I said, oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you, Safraz. Why don't you come and tell us how we are mistaken? But I doubt he'll have interest in doing that.
Safraz, I'm afraid for you, my friend, because for all that I know, and believe me, I checked a lot, hellfire is prepared for you, man. And I don't telling you that like I hate you. I really don't want for you to go in the hellfire. Believe me.
So it looks like Masi is trying to connect again, so hopefully it'll go through this time. Looks like we have him at least for a minute here. So welcome back, Masi.
He's muted. Unmute yourself, man. You are muted.
Yeah, I think he should be unmuted now.
Uh,
I'm not hearing anything though.
He's-
Is anyone else hearing him? Up and there, he dropped
I
again.
heard a hello. That's what I heard. Dang, I don't.
It's bad connection, I think, with him.
All right, see, you're back. You're back up, Mossy. Can you hear us? So I heard a hello and then he dropped again. So it looks like technology might not allow this conversation today, which is a shame because I really did want to hear his answer to those questions.
His Wi-Fi is daif.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's
comment.
Mavdu, basically. Mavdu. Rejected. False.
Yeah, I'm driving, so I'm not looking at the texts again.
Oh, that's
Sorry,
funny that you made the same comment as someone in chat because someone literally said Daif internet. So,
sorry, is this the Shafraz that like he was on debate with Mary, but he didn't show up?
No,
One
no, that's
time ago.
Alonzo. Safraz actually
Yeah.
did show up to talk to me. Safraz comes on.
Shafraz, Alonso. Sorry, Shafraz. Sorry, I thought it was him. Yeah.
He's the
Yeah,
one
I
who
don't think
explained why it was good for men to have sex with tiny little girls.
I think I recall that from my memory, but like from the fog, I cannot remember what exactly he said. Oh boy.
Yeah, he's been on a few times. He's an interesting character to say the least. To his credit, he's willing to come up here and defend Islam, which most Muslims aren't. Well, I don't know if it counts as defense, but he's willing to talk to us anyway.
He speaks
So,
little
Masi?
funny, right?
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's him. Yeah.
Yep, we might have you, Mossy. I am seeing that your connection is poor. Go ahead and try, though. You're muted on your end right now. I can see that, and then you're muted.
Masihi, you must unmute it yourself. You
Yeah,
muted your mic.
Again, I think that his connection is just not going to work out today. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this chat. I'll start with Mary since she was the last to come in. Your closing thoughts on today.
How's my connection right now? I'm coming into, and it's about to switch over from Wi-Fi or from phone to Wi-Fi. Is it good now?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay. So I think that a lot of Muslims get really, really confused about the point. Is Masi here now?
He's not connected. That was probably from earlier, and it just now came through.
It just now came through. Got it. Yep. That was very strange. Anyway, what Muslims get confused about over and over again because they won't read the Bible. They don't know what it is. They don't understand what previous prophets said and didn't say. So there are a whole bunch of texts that come from prophets, and these are inspired by God. And that does not mean that an angel came down and recited things word for word and the prophets wrote down the exact words that the angel said. They were inspired by God. It means that God led people to write a lot. Some things are directly quoted, but a lot of things they were led to write things in their own styles, in their own expressions. The message that God wanted them to convey. Now, outside of this are a whole bunch of other texts. People who were making up their own religions, people who were telling stories to entertain other people, people who were telling good stories for a religious purpose, for a religious message, kind of like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or The Chosen, or something else. They're fictional stories for a good purpose. but they're not scripture. They're just written by ordinary people to convey a message that they think is important. And whenever the Quran is supposedly revealed, instead of taking from the things that prophets said and was regarded as scripture, instead they borrow from these other things, these legends, these stories, fairy tales, moral tales, new cults that are founded and make up new things that are contrary to what the prophets taught. They quote from all the wrong things. It's like someone who thinks that they're talking about what God said and quotes from Narnia, or quotes from The Chosen, pieces that don't come from the scriptures but were made up by Dallas Jenkins or whatever his name is. And that's really the fundamental problem here, is that Muslims are so clueless as to what prophets didn't say, because they're so scared to actually read any of it, that they don't understand that their arguments don't work, because they're trying to defend things that are fiction and saying, oh, well, prophets, it's just repeating things from prophets. No, it's not. It's repeating bedtime stories. And so I think that's the big takeaway.
Excellent. Your closing thoughts, Rob? They're up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, everything that Mary said, everything we've just already shared on the stream. I think in closing, there's two forks in the road. If the Quran is genuinely from the creator of the universe, he decided to I guess troll and do a thought experiment himself. Let me compile in Arabic form the best of the last 5 centuries of human pesha and human tafsir and commentary on technically his authentic canon, which we would call the Bible. And it becomes this thing called the Quran. It's either that, or it's just one heck of a very interesting compilation of all those legends, but in an Arabic translation of those legends. I suppose you could even put in transliteration, but yeah. Or, to be a little bit polemical as a Christian, genuine demonic influence and inspiration. In other words, if I were to go down the supernatural route of intelligent evil and like a genuine intelligent demonic sort of like inspiration, yeah, just like how Satan misquoted scripture in Matthew 4 when in the wilderness, temptations of Christ. How curious, Muhammad's in a wilderness-like situation. He encounters this being, and then he himself is reacting like this could be a jinn. He himself is wanting to commit suicide sometimes, and all these fables in the Quran happen to be exactly how ironic. The Quran's own admission, the people who were going against these, calling it tales of the ancients. So, yeah.
I see that you did rejoin us, Masi. We're going to go ahead and wrap up today. Sorry your internet connection didn't work out that well, but I would welcome you again for a chat another day. Absolutely. Your closing thoughts, Alexander?
Yeah. Well, you need to watch it a lot of approaches. You basically just have to have one right approach. And the Jesus said, by the deeds you will know them, by the fruits. And tell me what kind of fruits are severe pedophilia that we are talking about, or killing apostates, or raping war prisoners. And don't tell me that I'm lying, because I can open you tafsirs, Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, name it, Jalalain. I can open you Sahih Hadiths and open you Sharia books, Hidayah, Reliance of the Traveler. I can find more, no problem. Same story. So tell me, what kind of roots are that? It's just basic logic. You don't need to know history, archaeology, linguistic, textual analysis, critics. Just common sense. You will give your little daughter with 7, 8, 9, 10 years to some sick guy to molesting her? Are you crazy? You would like your sister to be naked like a slave girl for some sick bastards, sorry for bad language, because Sharia allows that also. You would like your wife or sister or mother would be raped in some war, take like a war captive and raped, but with some six bastards that said my right hand possess this. Basic logic, people. Basic logic. And if you look archaeology, history, and everything, especially if you look Septuagint, Old Testament Septuagint, not Masoretic text, don't take like offense, brother Jews, but that is the fact. And compare it with archaeologist evidence about ancient Egypt and everything, you will saw that dates are, lapsing, everything go like Bible said. Even they was talking about the Gospels. It's like fiction story, but Gospel said that was like Siloam pool, Bethsaida pool, and that pool was founded like in last 30 or 50 years. Before that, people didn't know it that was there. So if you look historically, archaeologically, Bible go with history and archaeology. In the old times, scientists thought that it was like Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, was written about 200 years after Christ. But newest research showed that it was written by the Jew that was probably originated on the Aramaic or Jewish origin and translated to Greek. And that was much, much earlier, before the destruction of the Second Temple. And even the Gospel of Mark, they was taught it was like 70 AD. And why? Because scientists are atheists. Most of them are atheists. They don't believe that Jesus was God or that Jesus could give prophecies. So they said, okay, Jesus is not God and he could not give the prophecies. So Gospel of Mark talking about destruction of the Second Temple, and it was 70 AD. So probably it was written in that time. That is their main reason. So when you look at history, archaeology, it's go with the Bible, not with the Quran. If you go with common sense, it's go with the Bible, not the Quran. And if you look sources, again, sources go with the Bible, not with the Quran, because that stuff that was written about Moses, Abraham, Lot's brother, and everything in the Quran was from Apocrypha, and most of them for the Mary, for the Jesus, and most of them are like invented after Jesus. But if you look at the Bible, they have historical background, and that stories was before the Jesus. So whatever you like to look, Bible is the true book, and Quran, unfortunately for you, is not. And basically, if you look at the genesis of the Quran was not the book that was telling something to correct from the Bible, but it was the book that people who wrote it thought it was like based on the Bible, basically. So that's it.
Can I just also quickly say that coming back to the hypothesis I raised when I joined the stream, whenever the Quran says, is it in Surah 2 or Surah 3, like right at the start, where it says what's between his hands, or what's between his?
Oh, it says it many places. Actually,
3, I think 3, 4 at least. Surah 3 verse 4, I think, but I should check.
Okay, like basically, and then when Christians and Muslims dialogue, Christians will bring this up, in the sense that this is the Bible, this is the Old Testament and the New Testament that's in his hands. Okay, my theory, and this is not to discount the argumentation that Christians have by saying that that's the Bible in Muhammad's hands, and in that roundabout way, basically saying you can't then argue that the Bible is corrupted because look, it's in his hands. My theory is that based on everything we've just analyzed, how interesting that, for example, the Quran doesn't even get the Trinity right. The Quran repeats not the Gnostic Trinity of the Father, the Son, and Sophia. Sophia being this female version. In Gnosticism, you have the Father, the Logos, and a goddess-like, woman-like figure. And then the Quran says Allah, Jesus, and Mary. Now, my proposal is that whether it's Muhammad or whoever wrote the Quran or the Quran itself, I'll just say the Quran, whenever it speaks about what's between his hands or the people of the book or the book itself, I'm proposing it's not the Bible. I'm proposing the Quran thinks that the Gnostic, the Pseudepigrapha, and the Apocrypha is the Bible, and it has zero knowledge of the Bible. This is a radical proposal, but I'm proposing the Quran has zero knowledge of the Old Testament and the New Testament. It only has knowledge of what came after the New Testament. So basically 2nd century onwards. Or, I mean, I suppose you could say 1st century if you're talking about like life of Adam and Eve. That's dated, say, mid-1st century, somewhere around there. But 2nd century onwards is what the Quran thinks is what the people of the book use, and that is the book. I know it's a bit radical, but I can't help but think that based on everything we've discussed and the thought experiment I've raised, yeah, I don't know. Before you close the stream, what do you think of that proposal? Because,
yeah, I think that it is definitely plausible that the author of the Quran had specific texts in mind that he thought that he was affirming, and he just thought that those were the legitimate texts when they weren't. But yeah, I think that, the way you phrased it when you first came in, that everything is copied from something right in between the 2nd century and the 6th century. I think that that's accurate from my own research, and I think that your theory is quite plausible, that the author was in fact referring to specific texts that were available.
To be very direct, did the Quran author have any knowledge of what you and I would call the Hebrew canon or the New Testament canon?
Gospel of Matthew, yes, by the Badawi, Dr. Badawi, Imran Badawi. He said that Gospel of Matthew had some influence for the Quran and the Tessaron, but could be later influence when Arabs, came in touch with Jerusalem or with the Trinitarian Christian. So take some elements from there also, but most of that sources, as you saw, are taken from the Jewish Midrash, Talmud, and even apocryphal writings from the Jewish and Christian and Sabaeans, also from Iraq. Ginza Rabbah is from Iraq. It's that part of the world, and a lot of stuff from the Ginza Rabbah was made road to the Quran. So if you like, I would like to suggest you to take Ginza Rabbah and do that's kind of research with your program, because you are very good at that, and I suppose you will be very surprised with the similarities and the parallels from the Ginza Rabbah and Sabaeans and Quran and even Hadith and Islamic narrative.
Yeah. No worries.
So to answer for myself, the Hadith definitely seem to have some knowledge of, especially the writings of Paul, ironically enough. As far as the Quran itself goes, I don't see any particularly compelling evidence that the author had direct access to the scriptures. He may have had indirect knowledge of them, heard stories, and thus you can kind of sort of trace things. I don't see, with the caveat that I haven't looked into what Alexander just said, I don't see any evidence really that the Gospels are quoted, that the one thing that the author of the Quran definitely doesn't seem to have any interest in is the canonical Gospel, which makes perfect sense in light of what you were saying earlier, Rob, where we have to consider the possibility that this is demon inspired. And that would, of course, be the one thing that they would definitely not want in there. I did tell Masi that I would let him have a closing word. So Masi, you're up now. Still there, Masi?
You know about Saint Paul in the Islam, that you will not find not single, even daif hadith. You will find some rejected hadiths that are probably later interpolations, and even Islamic scholars rejected that Apostle Paul was bad guy. But you will find at least one hadith from the book of Ibn Hibban. It's quoted from Ibn Kathir, and it's Sahih, and it's praised Apostle Paul. And but Ibn Kathir, because of the Islamic narrative, told this is very strange hadith, even if he is Sahih, So, so Apostle Paul in early Islam was pretty praised, because you will find a lot of good daif hadiths, but good hadiths in the lot of Islamic books and tafsirs, and even one of the Sahih hadiths from the Ibn Hibban, and it's like fourth most reliable collection of hadiths. Bukhari, Muslim, Sharzani, I forgot the third, and fourth was Ibn Hibban.
Hello. Can you hear me?
All right, Masi? Yes, we can hear
okay.
you now. So you have an opportunity to give your closing thoughts.
Okay, now as far as dynamic inspiration, when the Quran states all who follow Jesus will be superior in the sight of God till the day of resurrection, is that a dynamic inspiration? When the Quran states all who follow Jesus, their hearts will be filled with compassion and mercy, is that dynamic too? I mean, we can bring up verses which are not 100% or close to what the Old Testament is conveying about Solomon or Moses, but those historic events have no relevance to do with a man's salvation. It's the conversion of heart. When a person who follows Jesus, when his heart is filled with compassion and mercy, that is the stuff that saves him, not the history lessons or whether the history is true or not. You people are concentrating on the negatives. Why not look at the positive? Why not look at the decree of Allah in Surah 1921, where Allah decrees, God decrees Jesus to be the sign of men and a mercy from us? It is a matter decreed. Do you think this can be dynamic inspiration? I don't get it. Please have an open mind and approach it with an open thought. Thank you.
Because
thank you.
This is the same argument I hear all the time. When the moment historical details are showcased to be non-historical, okay, it's meant to be a guide. It's meant to guide us. Okay, you know what? I'm going to run, since I'm a cyberpunk fan in the cyberpunk genre, I'm going to run with like Blade Runner and a little bit of Star Wars and a little bit of Terminator. And, like I'm going to run with like Matrix. Matrix is like In fact, I have, what I call the Matrix, a cyberpunk parable on my YouTube channel, like a whole playlist where I break down the whole movie, and I could make up a Matrix religion. Like, you can't stop me. And I have the assertion that unless you go down, you take the red pill that I'm offering in this religion, you're going to hell. This is just ridiculous, this form of argumentation. For example, Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Tolkien was a Christian. One of Tolkien's famous sayings is, Christianity, out of all the myths in the world, Christianity is the true myth. Christianity is the most complete form of what he coined, the eucatastrophe, the joyful catastrophe, or the surprising catastrophe of, like, in other words, Jesus's death was a catastrophe, but then it became what he coined a eucatastrophe, or like a surprise, like, oh my gosh, there's resurrection. And you see this play out in all his, basically in Lord of the Rings. The point that Tolkien was getting at is he purposely made, something like the Lord of the Rings to establish that you could really make one heck of a complex, massive, mythical world. And as Peter Jackson's interpretation, as you could see, bloody hell, it's long, it's complex, it's all these, and at the end of the day, it's just that. It's just a fictional story. There's a difference, and that's Tolkien's point. He wanted to bridge those to showcase, look, I can give the most complex myth story ever, and people obviously love Lord of the Rings, right? Because of how complex and how imaginative and how sometimes beautiful it is, but everyone knows it's fiction. And then there's Christianity. That's Tolkien's point. This is why C.S. Lewis converted to Christianity, because C.S. Lewis was friends of Tolkien. So Christianity is the true myth because of the historical details. Imagine if a Christian responded to atheists like Bart Ehrman. Okay, Ehrman, the resurrection and the story of the resurrection is meant to be a guide. Don't worry about the historical details. Don't worry about the pre-Pauline Creed in 1 Corinthians 15. Just, which is, by the way, the Kerygma is based on a historical, but, putting that aside, let's use the Muslim argument. Bart Ehrman and all the atheists would just make a mockery of this. It's like, okay, fine, I'm going to find guidance through Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Whoop-de-doo. No, this is not how you establish, the veracity of what happened in the past. And so therefore, if and you're not the first Muslim to give that answer. Just the other day, I was on Muslim Cowboy's stream. I'm bringing up similar everything we brought up tonight. I brought it up with them. Obviously, one Muslim got really irate and started ad hominems and calling me names, but the more gentler Muslim guest, who's a genuine, he's like a nice. I reckon he's a nice person. He just flat out is just telling me, no, it's just a guide. It's, don't worry about the historical details. Like, you don't need to. In other words, when the Quran mentions, say, the Pharaoh and Moses and Haman, and in that Exodus, Egypt context. So someone like me is interested in, okay, which Pharaoh? Is it Ramses the Great? Which means, okay, it's the 19th dynasty, and now we can pinpoint the exact era, the exact date. We can do like a historical analysis on the Exodus account and then verify that it's a true story. No, but the Quran, no. The pharaoh is unnamed. Don't worry, we don't need to know if it's Ramses the Great. We don't need to know which dynasty it is in. It just happened because Muhammad was genuinely getting revelation from Allah, and that's that. Just accept it and move on and just treat it like a guide. Then any form of verification of the historical details is you fall. I'm not saying you, but Muslims fall into the bracket of hypocrisy when they then go out of their way to go, oh, look at this scientific miracles, and oh, look at this historical verification in the Quran, when it mentions like these details, we wouldn't have expected this from a 7th century illiterate prophet. No, I thought we are not meant to go down the historical analysis of these stories. Like, anyway, I'm just going on a mini rant here, but it's, yeah. The moment you, okay, in conclusion, the moment you go down like when you say it's a guide, you've then told me, or you've further solidified my skepticism of the Quran that it is a man-made document, bottlenecked in a 7th century Arabian genuine illiterate whoever person or group of people who only had access to what Christians would call the Subrigrapha, the Gnostic texts, and so on, not the actual Bible that Christians utilized. Because don't forget, there was no internet back then, so they couldn't do like a Google search, BibleGateway.com, and read it for themselves. It's quite possible the Bible was scarce, and yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, that if you have no basis, and this is what I was trying to get at with Masi before we had the connection problems, that if you have no basis to believe something is true, it doesn't matter how much you like what it has to say, you still have no reason to believe it's true. If you're just going to go with what you like, then you can just make up something on your own, or you can go to Tolkien or whatever and be inspired by that. I need a historical basis for actually believing that my religion is the true religion, and that's what Christianity and Christianity alone provides. And that is why it is the true religion. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope that this material was beneficial. I'll get the PowerPoint presentation uploaded so that people who are interested in taking a closer look at the sources can do so. Tomorrow I will be live with Inspiring Philosophy. We're going to be talking about whether the Trinity doctrine makes sense, whether it holds up to logical, philosophical scrutiny, or whether it's just something that is, kindly put, a complete mystery that no one could possibly understand, or, as a critic would say, something that's incoherent and illogical. So if you're interested in that discussion, tune in tomorrow. I'll try to get something scheduled with Rob to look at the Muslim interpretation of the universe, that is the Islamic cosmology, and see just how interesting that is. And I will welcome Alexander back to discuss historical origins of Islam or anything else he wants to another time. Masi Muslim, you're also welcome back for another discussion. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope you got benefit out of this. Take the information, use it in your discussions with Muslims. God bless.
God bless people.